Takže tady to je copyrighted hudba, jo. To je v píči. Jsem ani nevěděl. Bych nečekal, že tohle to bude copyrighted hudba. Takový lo-fi, vole, Naruto vibe a copyrighted, jo.
The woke mob not only exposes your cowardice, but proves that your friendships only exist when it benefits your career. As the Canadian rapper BB No or Baby No Money, who previously performed at the Streamer Awards fawning over Asmongold.
My favorite streamer without indubious question is Asmongold, baby!
And yes, that is Asmongold painted on his chest. Released a music video yesterday called Mary Poppins. It opens with a message saying, when this was recorded, he was unaware of a certain individual's ethical beliefs. So he censored those whose values he does not support, which traps him as he's going to be asked to answer for the ethics and beliefs of everybody in the video that's not censored. And it's a large group of people who stream online for countless hours a week who are almost guaranteed to get caught up in their own controversy.
To si vem, že seš Asmongold teda. Nechodíš moc, jako takhle, on chodí, nebudeme říkat, že nechodí jako ven, ale řekněme, že 70% času je doma. A že on nechodí na tyhle eventy, nechodí Twitchkony, nechodí jako cizí podcasty a tak podobně. Jediný, kdy je na podcastu, že tak je to OTK, ale taky to není tak tolik častý. A ty teda, že jo, si vím, že on teda zvedne tu svoji prdel, musí teda odjet na nějaký určitý místo, musí změnit svůj outfit ještě do toho. Pravděpodobně tam do toho bylo i nějaký to líčení, že jo, protože musíš mít na sobě nějaký make-up na kameře, aby se neměl lesklou vole pleť. A na konci toho všeho tě vycenzurujou. No ty píčo.
But only the king in the middle was censored out, which was very obviously Asmongold, formerly from OTK, or One True King, as Bino no longer wants to be seen dancing around with him. But Asmongold harbors no hard feelings.
Like, this is why I've moved a lot away from like collabing and doing anything with anybody else, is because I know that obviously a lot of people don't want to be involved with the things that I do. I don't view this as like a bad thing, right? Like, it's just the way it is. I don't ever blame people for not wanting to be involved with it or not wanting to be involved with me because of it.
And later laughs it off, saying he just appreciates getting more teeth in post-production, which is a great attitude for Asmongold to have, as I understand what it is to be seen as controversial or polarizing, and one of my hobbies is helping up-and-coming creators understand YouTube. But I take no offense and actually suggest that they don't publicly disclose our partnership, as someone covering sports, doing tech, or vlogging about fashion shouldn't even acknowledge politics, because like any conflict, it's super easy to get in, but almost impossible to get out. As the music video comments are filled with, how long before he has to censor everyone, pointing out how he censored Asmongold, but not Mizkif, standing with Mizkif and Emily, but not Asmon, and that Bino's dance moves are even more impressive when you realize he does them without a spine. Now, honestly, I don't know much about these other scandals, but it's just a preview on how the loudest corners of the internet are now going to pressure him into taking a side on every single one of them, further dividing his remaining audience. As it's just like when Jordan Peterson told H3H3, going after that same crowd will hold him to impossible to maintain standards, and once you make a mistake, they will devour you with glee. Which is exactly what happened, and it's not like the left has since become more reasonable or more understanding, as Bino could have been hanging out with Hassan, then seen dancing around with Asmongold, the same way that Joe Rogan could platform Bernie Sanders, or equally stupid Andrew Yang, and then be seen speaking with Donald Trump. Of course, Rogan's gonna get waves of hate, but the average person isn't paying enough attention to politics to even care. So by placating the fringe groups that would melt down over seeing Asmongold in a music video, the focus now isn't about...
A to je zase dost divný, ty vole. Se divím, jako že zrovna jako člověk, jako je Joe Rogan, dostane hate za to, že si tam pozve, jakoby, řekněme, lidi z jinýho a z druhé strany těch ostatních lidí, než tam mělo, že jo. Že přitom Joe Rogan je nějaký člověk, který se tam pozve kohokoliv, který je jako nějak zajímavý zrovna pro něj v té určité době. Což vlastně o tom je celý jeho podcast. Vím, jako, že se ještě najdou lidi, kteří tohle to nasere. To fakt.
the music, but protecting the fragile emotions of your leftover listeners. Like how Hassan's fans heckle him over drinking Coca-Cola.
You need to stop drinking Coke Zero on stream.
Why?
It's boycott.
Wait, is it?
You're preaching pro-Palestine and you're drinking all this boycott stuff. Please, Hassan.
How long until Beano's fans demand he can't perform at festivals that have ever been sponsored by Coca-Cola? Or does his activism simply end at blurring out somebody's face that doesn't pay him to be on stage? As now look at Beano's posts on Twitter stating, spreading love and positivity, with the replies all going after him over his inconsistency, saying I liked your music, but the more you talk, the less I want to listen. Spreading love while defending the guys on Twitch that support very evil things. While the only place in favor of him was predictably Reddit, as they claim he's a good role model for other men, with what looks like fanfiction about him, but also how he's not a great musician, but a good guy, or even saying that his songs suck, but he says the right things, and then start asking him to stop working with other people that they don't like, as his other music video from a year ago featured Moist Critical. And with the emergence of streamers becoming celebrities, it's actually a smart move to use them in music videos to help generate interest in your songs. And censoring them out at the slightest amount of controversy makes it feel less like a friendship and more like a sponsored brand deal, which is sad to think of all your friendships as transactional. I can only be your friend as long as it doesn't damage my income. So even if they believe the same things about war with Russia, the same things about masking in public, or BLM protests, and even as far back as Coney 2012, if we don't continue to completely mirror each other's feelings about the newest thing, I'm gonna paste a dinosaur over your face. Why doom scroll on social media all day when you have my concise, lighthearted commentary on the tragic status that is today's reality?
Roach King is a humble king.
Chongare's
Okay, to
recently
mě
dropped
zajímá.
a bombshell video outlining an alleged match-fixing scandal that has infested Tier 2 North American Valorant. He suspects that a gambling ring has generated hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars by manipulating the outcomes of challengers' matches. This is arguably the biggest scandal to ever shake competitive.
Millions of dollars, jo. Tohle je vlastně o tom, že jsou falšované výsledky, nebo jako, že hráči prohrávají hry prostě schválně. A my neříkej, protože to je Challenger. My neříkej, že tam je tolik peněz, ty vole, jako ve Valorantu v Challengeru na sázky. By mě zajímalo, jak je to u nás, ty vole, v Česku na e-sport. Vůbec nikdy nekoukal, to je pořádně, jak to je na ty sporty nebo ve Fortuně.
Valorant, and if true, could mark the death of the game's Tier 2 scene in NA. In the context of ranked Valorant, match fixing has been an issue for years. Word got out back in 2022 that there were sites where people could bet on Valorant rank matches using crypto, and that certain bad actors were getting into streamers and pros matches to manipulate the outcome, ensuring that their bets would hit.
Bro, someone bet on our game and is messaging me about it. I can't
How do you
believe
know?
people actually do that
Thanks.
shit. He's messaging me about it.
Why,
He's
is
like,
it
throw.
Glob?
I'm like, no. Yeah.
What?
He said tell Adder to throw. I got 50 on you guys losing. I'm like, no.
People actually bet on my shit, dude. I swear, I
I
swear.
thought he was kidding, bro. I genuinely thought he was kidding at
Eyes
first.
up.
He's serious.
And in 2025, things aren't much better. Even as recently as last week, Shazam shared screenshots on Twitter of text messages that he received where the alleged Twitter of
So also right now, hey there Shazam, if you do not start this game, I'll open loans on your name. Socialist, cože.
text messages that he received
If you do not start throwing this game, I will open loans your own name. Your social is, jako on má i jeho to, jo, sociální číslo. No neříkej, vole,
where
bíčo.
the alleged gamblers threatened to open loans with his social security number and even threatened him with violence if he refused to throw his matches.
There will be 4 men with AR-15s at your door. I když, jako takhle, jo, jako jestli to je pravda, tak je to hnus jako svině, ale zase zároveň jako je to Shazam, jo. Nesmíme to brát úplně, vole, doslova.
On stream. He
Může
went
být
on
fake,
to call
vole.
out Riot for their lack of response to the situation, stating, quote, "We've been dealing with our rank games on betting websites for a couple of years now, telling Riot about it, and they've continued to not do anything about it until it gets to this point." It's pretty clear that Riot still has a lot of work to do to combat these crypto throwers, but recent events suggest that this issue runs much deeper than we initially thought. Back on May 15th, Valorant TO Mr. Funhaver began talking about alleged match fixing within the NA Tier 2 scene on his Twitch stream.
The money being offered is genuinely insane. I don't know if it's real because, again, I haven't communicated with any of these supposed win traders. I have communicated with some of them about the situation, but myself and my own team had people DM us saying, "Hey, we want to pay you to throw your game."
From there, Mr. Funhaver continued sharing some serious allegations on stream, suggesting that on top of match fixing, certain Challengers players have been using cheats in official matches, and that a member of Riot's anti-cheat department knows about it.
There is an active Riot employee that is very high in the anti-cheat department being paid off to let people cheat. And I have proof of this. I have seen it, and it is a very real thing. I can't share that, and I don't know if that's being investigated right now or not.
No ale co to jsou za cheaty? To by mě zajímalo taky, jakože. Jako jestli to jsou cheat, jako ono to je jedno, jako cheat, prostě cheatuješ, jsi zmrt, ještě když je to e-sport. Ale asi jako aimlock to nebude, že jo, to by šlo moc vidět. A pravděpodobně, že už jako třeba jestli to je, aby ti ukázalo jako minimapu, kde jsou ostatní hráči, že možná to. To se dělalo v PUBG, že jo, tohleto.
That is a problem.
Shortly after, Shopify Rebellion General Manager Sean Garez joined the stream and put Mr. Funhaver on blast for blowing open a case that he'd been working on for over a week. Sean then tweeted that the whole scene is rotten to the core and that he couldn't wait to show everyone. He also added that he'd burn it.
Kde to je, vole, tady to? GMko Creator. OK, já myslel, že to je, ale to je CSGO, jo. On řeší jako na Valorant. Jo, X100 Valorant coach, to ani nevím. Je, počkejte, tady ten týpek. OK.
To the ground to make things what they were before Riot closed off their tournament circuit. What he
I've put it to the ground to make it back to what it was pre-PC. What I found is absolutely disgusting.
found was, in his words, absolutely disgusting. Following that stream from Mr.
Jako když to říká týpek, co koučoval, vole, jeden z nejlepších týmů v Americe.
Funhaver on
Asi na tom něco
Sean
bude.
Garez posted what was essentially a teaser for his video about the match fixing situation. In the teaser, he reiterated just how severe things were. He said that, unlike the infamous iBuyPower scandal that rocked the CSGO community back in 2014, this gambling operation was on an entirely different level. He believes that it's generating hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars. He also mentioned that both Riot and NA Challengers were conducting their own investigations as well. Riot's head of anti-cheat, Philip Koskinas, tweeted that same day that, quote, "We have not received any reports of an anti-cheater accepting a bribe or of a rioter letting someone use cheats. If any credible evidence is received, I will investigate immediately." But after Sean Gareth shared his short 5-minute teaser video, members of the community began commenting on the state of Tier 2. Most notably, Ten said that Riot essentially killed.
Ale to je stejně zajímavý, jakože když si to vezme, že jestli říkat, jestli to, co říká, je pravda. Tak si vím, že máš teda člověka, který dělá v anti-cheat departmentu. A že jo, tam není jediný, že jo, tam dělá víc lidí. A To přece nemůže fungovat tak, že jeden ten člověk brání třeba celý tým nebo třeba 2, 3 lidi z nějakého týmu. Protože, vole, když děláš, vole, v anti-cheatu, tak se nestaráš o nějakého jako určitýho člověka, že jo? Ty procházíš celý všechny hráče a procházejí všichni ty zaměstnanci, že jo? Tady to jako nedává smysl, že jo? To by potom znamenalo, vole, že ty ostatní zaměstnanci o tom vědějí.
Tier 2 the moment they moved to a franchise system ahead of the 2023 season. He added that he wasn't surprised to hear of players match.
Počkej, co říkal? To war vomit a bit on the timeline, the current state of any Valorant below the tier 1 level is an absolute terrible place. Help and introduce the franchise system without providing hands-on support for the Challenges League or offering proper financial aid to the org.
Notably, Ten said that Riot essentially killed Tier 2 the moment they moved to a franchise system ahead of the 2023 season. He added that he wasn't surprised to hear of players match fixing for life-changing amounts of money. Tens went on to share his disappointment towards the way that Riot have mishandled.
Jako co tak vím, tak Valorant hráči dostávají píču, no. Jakože hodně velkou píču. Jakože pro většinu to, no, pro většinu e-sport hráčů je lepší si založit Twitch a streamovat, co to dá, no. Aby se jim vydělal jako na ten Twitch a oni potom mohli přejít z toho e-sportu na ten livestream. Že to dělal sám a jak moc se jmenuje, ten druhej, byl taky v Energy, teď nevím, jak se jmenuje, to boha.
Handled the game that he says he still truly loves and cares about, while mentioning that he feels that there's no incentive for players to continue grinding ranked. Nobody really cares about getting the same gun buddy after every episode. That's just the reality of things. Late last year, we actually sat down with Valorant's head of global esports, Leo Faria, to discuss some of the struggles that Tier 2 players and orgs are facing, and here's what he had to say back then.
Now, I think it's fair to recognize that the system as is, it's for the most part closed, right? We have 10 teams, 2 Ascension teams. And I think to make a more sustainable change, to make a more substantial change, like I said, it's probably going to take us a couple more years to rethink the structure and the model and how it affects global events. But there's definitely an appetite and a willingness from our side at Riot to make more changes to make the system work a little better.
Now, I know that Leo mentioned that these changes could take years to implement, but I can't help but think that the current state of Tier 2 Valorant could force Riot to come up with solutions even sooner. More and more orgs are leaving the scene, and they need some sort of financial incentive to stay in Valorant. Orgs aren't willing to field teams and pay salaries when only one team ascends into VCT each year. But regardless, on May 24th, Sean Guerres released his highly anticipated expose. In the nearly hour-long video, he shares screenshots of messages between a Valorant player named Bray and 2 Challengers players who Sean says have been helping him uncover the truth. Tier 2 players Practo and Teague have been communicating with Bray to better understand how this alleged match-fixing scheme works. In the screenshots, Bray offers tens of thousands of dollars to the players in exchange for throwing maps to manipulate the outcomes and betting odds of certain matches. He asks the players to delete all of their messages with him and to move the conversation over to Telegram. Sean also mentioned someone named Cooker, who is the founder of a crypto trading group called Pastel Alpha. Back on April 29th, Cooker placed 3 separate bets for a total of $30,000 on Burger Boys to beat Blue Otter, and the bets, of course, hit. Yeah, that's a hell of a lot of money to bet on a random Tier 2 Valorant match. But Sean Guerres' team actually lost to Blue Otter the following week, and it left a sour taste in his mouth.
I don't know, it didn't sit well with me when I signed off the co-stream, so I went back that night and I rewatched the VODs. I have rarely in my career, I can't even remember times where I've got out of a game and I thought the other team was cheating in some kind of way. I believe it to be a loser mentality, and it will hinder growth in any kind of competitive sport. So I try not to cope and use these things as excuses. And honestly, I don't think I ever have in my whole career. but this match was different.
Sean goes on to share screenshots that Blue Otter's duelist player, Fair, allegedly received from Riot's esports compliance team asking for him to provide a personal account of what happened during specific rounds against Burger Boys. The remainder of Sean's video is him breaking down certain moments from Blue Otter's matches against Shopify and Burger Boys. He mainly singles out Bob and
No, to je právě to, co se divím, vole. Že ono se dá, kámo, sázet na... To je prostě jako druhá liga. Ještě e-sport. Jako hraní her, vole. Chápu jako normální, že jo, první ligu, že jo. Jako je VCT, ale úplně na no name, jako...
Fair, but he also admits that there's some questionable decision making coming from the entire team. He shows rounds where he believes Blue Otter players were intentionally throwing, but also rounds where he believes that they were cheating against his team. Overall, the community has really praised Sean for the work that he has put in here, piecing together this alleged scandal. But he has also received some criticism for the VOD review portion of the video. Obviously, players can have an off day where they look nothing like themselves, so without concrete evidence like money changing hands, it's tough to prove, especially when we're still waiting on a replay system.
Desperation evidence? Ooh, evidence could be risky, bro. You could maybe potentially think somebody's match fixing, but in reality they're just ass. Ooh, that could really if he got any of this wrong, that could really hurt a player's career. So hopefully he didn't get any of that wrong.
Considering Sean has been in esports for well over a decade now, I'm sure he understands more than anyone how a false accusation could impact a player's career. He ended his video by saying that he believes that there are way more players and teams involved in this scandal, but the use of crypto as a betting fuel and apps like Telegram have made things hard to trace. Not to mention that more evidence might be getting deleted now that the scandal has been made public. And since Sean's video came out, Riot have issued a statement to inform the community that their investigation is well underway. They also reminded everyone that match fixing isn't just against their rules, it's also a criminal offense in many places. In the meantime, FlyQuest Red have benched Bob, who currently plays for them in the Game Changer circuit, in addition to Blue Otter. Blue Otter issued a statement of their own saying that they will continue to support their players until more concrete evidence comes to light. All 5 players also issued a joint statement to share that their
Tohle je ale zase dobrý, že ta organizace za ním stojí, nebo za nima. Jo, jako i kdyby teda cheatovali, tak je aspoň vidět, že, protože většinou, co se děje, že je to, že jaká malinkatá kontroverze, tak hned ty agentury, že jo, ty týmy je dýčnou, ty hráče. Což je jako zajímavý tohoto vidět, že je nedyčný.
working on a video response to the allegations. They say that they've received death threats as a result of them and that they deny ever cheating or match fixing. We have no idea how long Riot's investigation might take, especially considering that law enforcement is now involved. But regardless, as soon as we have any new info, we'll make sure to keep you posted.
Thanks for watching. If you want more content like this, hit the sub button and ring the notification bell.
Dobrý video, no. Uzi je v Hall of Legends, hovno. To ani nevím, ty vole. 11 days ago. Does this to milk the Chinese player doesn't change the fact that
Uzi is the latest addition.
Can make enough impact on the game. Je pravda, no. Jako Uzi nevyhrál jako to ani jednou World Championship, pokud vím. Ale všichni prostě, kdo minimálně hráli LOLko aspoň třeba rok, 2 roky, tak prostě všichni znali Uziho.
The second player after Faker to be inducted into the League of Legends Hall of Fame. Let's take a look at why he earned the honor ahead of other contenders and who might be next to have their name etched into League of Legends immortality.
Ty vole, jak se jmenuje ten? On hrál, myslím, že hrál s tím, ne? S Fakerem. A když poprvé vyhráli World Championship. Nebo to nehrál s Fakerem? Jak se jmenoval ten, ty vole, co hrál Lísina? Ty piča, už se nepamatuju jméno.
Uzi is
Ten už dávno nehraje, ale ten by si možná taky
AD carry personified, and for many people, the greatest player to touch the game after Faker. The Chinese pro began his career in 2012 with Royal Club and quickly earned a reputation for his slick movement, perfect positioning, and clutch plays when his back was against the ropes.
Oh, lovely. Nicely going very deep. Cool going to go over towards Sammy. There's a Stan United being used very early. Uzi is coming in from the backside. Surprise! Here comes the vein. Kill for White. San's not going to escape this one. They focus down Uzi, but look at him. He's still alive. He's still surviving. He stays alive. Ace for Royal Club. What an amazing fight coming out of Uzi. God.
Uzi was a key factor in
To byla
Royal
úplně
Club's
jiná hra.
incredible run to the 2013 World Championship final, where they ultimately fell to Faker's SKT T1 in his first World's title win. And it's important to remember Uzi's World's title win to Faker, where they
Počkej. Byl to Benji nebo ne?
ultimately fell to Faker's SKT T1 in his first World's title win. And it's important to remember, Uzi was just 15 years old at the time. That's something that's often overlooked given the extraordinary level he was already playing at. He suffered another heartbreaking loss in the 2014 World's final to Samsung Galaxy, but making it to back-to-back World's finals helped cement Uzi as one of the game's greats. His skill on squishy, unforgiving champs like Vayne and Cogmore became legendary. RNG built their teams around him, running the now famous Protect the Puppy comps that focused entirely around keeping Uzi alive. He was famously resource-hungry, demanding all the farm and attention his teammates could spare, but in return, he delivered. After brief stints with OMG and QG Reapers, he returned to RNG in 2016, leading them to 2 LPL titles in 2018 and an unforgettable MSI championship that year as well. But despite all the accolades, Uzi's career often felt like a story of what could have been. Health issues repeatedly held him back from reaching even greater heights. In June 2020, he announced his retirement from professional play, citing the development of type 2 diabetes. Though he briefly returned in 2021 with Billy Gaming and later played a split with Edward Gaming in 2023, Uzi failed to qualify for Worlds that year. He soon announced on stream that he was retiring once again, admitting that the desire to compete had been defeated by reality. Yesterday, Riot announced that Uzi has been named the second inductee into the League of Legends Hall of Legends, following in the footsteps of Faker. His formal induction ceremony will take place in Shanghai on June 6th, followed by an in-game event on June 11th, featuring a dedicated event pass and cosmetics themed around his career, with a signature skin expected for one of his iconic champions. As with Faker last year, Mercedes-Benz will also be presenting a custom art piece to Uzi honoring his career, as well as his own Mercedes-Benz car. So what will Uzi's signature skin be? Well, some older fans might instantly guess Vayne, a champion he became synonymous with in his early career, as seen in his portrayal as Vayne in the legendary Rise video for Worlds 2018. But the smart money is probably on Kai'Sa. She was his most played champion during that golden 2018 season, and it also makes more sense from a sales perspective. Kai'Sa is far more popular than Vayne in both solo queue and pro play. That said, a Vayne skin could still be part of the event.
Jako jo, ale tak zase Faker taky dostal vole a hry, že jo. I když u Fakera možná by dával smysl, vole, taky možná ten Z, no. Jakože z toho sales hlediska. I když jako Ahry je oblíbená, no, jakože to je taky pravda, no, že i když ten champion je, vole, jaký starý, vole, jak ta hra, tak je pořád jako oblíbený, jo.
Event pass. And just like when Faker was inducted into the Hall of Legends, there's already been speculation about who will be next and who should be next. Some believe the early inductees should represent a wide range of regions, since the Hall of Legends is as much a celebration for fans as it is a measure of competitive greatness. Others argue it should stick strictly to merit, even if that means the first dozen names or so come exclusively from China and Korea. Would you be annoyed to see Caps get in over the Shy, Bjergsen over Bengi? I've seen this spark some pretty heated discussions. Even Uzi's induction so soon into the Hall of Legends has been questioned by some who think that his lack of Worlds titles should have pushed his name much further down the list.
Isn't Uzi like the most overrated pro player in existence?
I don't know.
No.
Okay, buddy.
Good reach, mate.
I just remember him not being that good.
Why? Because he never won Worlds, that's why.
He hasn't even won the Worlds.
But as Chris Greeley, global head of LoL Esports, said in a statement yesterday, Uzi's legacy goes beyond his titles and achievements. He changed the way we view the bot lane role and left a permanent mark on League of Legends esports. His passion and determination have inspired millions. And once we saw the voting breakdown from the global votes, it was clear that Uzi had left his mark on LoL Esports. We are honored to induct him in the Hall of Legends. Ultimately, we always knew the Hall of Legends was never going to be a strictly quantifiable list of who's won the most titles, starting with Faker and then just sorting by trophies to see who's next. That would leave no room for surprise.
Tak jasně, že jo, tak o to ani nešlo, tam ani předtím, podle mě, jako podle mě málo lidí si říkalo, že jo, že Faker je jako první v tom Hall of Fame, protože vyhrál nejvíc titulů, to je píčovina, že jo. To bylo převážně, protože je to Faker. Prostě všichni znají Fakera. I ty, vole, co nehrajou LoLko, znají Fakera. Ten měl prostě největší impact na LoLko. Tak je potom úplně jasný, že nejde o to, že kdo vyhrál, vole, VOD, tak kokotina. A co si budeme jako Uziho znají, taky jako plno lidí. Overrated, vole, co říkal ten, bych jako nikdy v životě neřekl o Uzim. Ale jako impact měl obrovský, no, na tu hru. Mě zajímalo, jestli další bude třeba Mata, nebo ten, jak se jmenuje, kurva. Shit, teď nevím, jak on se jmenuje, ten Trash. To byla, já s těma jménama, vole, to je hrozný. Ale jako myslím si, no, že pravděpodobně tak těch prvních 5 v tom Hall of Fame budou všichni, vole, z Asie. Protože reálně Caps si nemyslím, že si tam zaslouží být ještě momentální fázi. A Bjergsen takový impact taky neměl, jakože na tu hru. Nebo měl, ty vole? Jako možná ten Bjergsen, no. V těch posledních letech potom už to jako upadlo. Ale v těch prvních letech, kdy on začal hrát potom pro to TCM, tak to bylo něco jiného, no.
Speculation or debate, some of the best parts about being a fan of, well, anything. There's supposed to be room for players who have not only taken titles, but captured the hearts and minds of fans across League of Legends' 16-year history. And by that measure, Uzi is a no-brainer. So keep debating what the Hall of Legends should be, who deserves to get in, and what the criteria should look like. That's what any good Hall of Fame is all about. Right now, we've got Faker and Uzi. Not a bad start. Who do you think is next?
Jako oni podle mě pojedou je trošku jinak, no, ale když to vezmeš podle toho, kdo měl jako největší impact, tak to musí být, vole, to musí být Čína, Korea, Japonsko, jako. Ale oni 100% potom přivedou někoho z NA nebo z EU. Aby to jakoby trošku rozbili. Jako jo, no, možná i Alexič, vole, by tam nebyl špatný. To jsem dlouho nesledoval.
Happy Memorial Day, everyone. I hope that you are settled in and ready because we have a packed show for you today. First of all, we have to revisit the Senate twink because apparently he has no remorse for screwing in the Senate. We also need to talk about some trans rock climbers who are sending a message to Trump, and we are going to discuss Diddy's connection to the mafia. So, my friends, the Senate twink is just the gift that keeps on giving, and he just did yet another interview, actually with one of my favorite writers over at New York Magazine, and there is just so much to unpack. Now, if you guys don't remember, we actually talked about this young man just a couple of months ago. We did kind of a recap, what has transpired in his life since that fateful day when he decided that he should have sex in the Senate, but he is back to give us even more juicy information. Before we get into that, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. and of course ring that notification bell to stay up to date on all of our episodes. And as a reminder, I am going on tour this spring. We still have tickets available, and we added 2 new shows in Dallas and in Austin because those were sold out. So if you want to get tickets and come join in on all the fun, you can visit brettcooper.com. So the crux of what we talked about the last time that we covered this young man was the fact that he was asking for privacy, and yet nothing about his life was private at all. In fact, he had created an OnlyFans, and he had changed his Instagram handle to be Senate Twink. He was really trying to build upon this scandal, albeit it was a little late. And so I think that is the purpose of this new interview that he did with New York Magazine. And surprise, he never actually wanted the privacy that he claimed he wanted right after the sex scandal took place. And even bigger surprise, he's actually not sorry at all for doing what he did. In fact, he did it because he was bored. So the article reads, listening to him recount his days getting paid by Congress to do nothing, quote, I would beg the chief of staff or whoever for work. I had nothing to do, is cause enough to wonder whether Elon Musk's blathering about government inefficiency is, on its face, well-founded. What is it that they say about idle hands? Quote, I would come in 9 hours a day, sit there bored out of my effing mind. So yeah, I'm going to entertain myself and F in a room. Specifically, Part 216. So he was bored. Guys, I mean, why are we even upset at this young man? It was just government inefficiency and he was bored, so what else was he gonna do? I mean, this so reminds me of Denise Richards' daughter, where she was like, I wanted to move out, it was a candy store OnlyFans. It was sitting at my desk scrolling on TikTok or having sex in the Senate hearing room. I mean, guys, I think that there are things you can do in between these two extremes. I don't know if we've lost nuance in the world, but that's just what I'm feeling right now. Anyway, continuing on with this article, apparently his therapist told him that he was subconsciously sabotaging his career. He also talked about how he is not the only one who is engaged in this kind of behavior, and in his anger and frustration with this scandal exploding, he thought about throwing everybody else under the bus who has effed in a Senate room. The writer Brock says, quote, in some sense, I effed in the Senate because I was miserable and wanted a way out. He's trying to hold no grudges and has no desire to suss out his leaker. Quote, I had a half second where I was like, I
No
know...
počkej, ale s kým to mělo jako? Si přivedl prostě ženskou do toho senátu, nebo to byl někdo taky z toho senátu?
So many people who have effed in the Senate, I could throw people under the bus to water out my own scandal. Excuse me? You know so many people. Like, I understand that we live in a deranged, hypersexual society. I understand that there are things that go on in government. I mean, we all watched the Madison Cawthorn scandal unfold, where he basically said that there were sex parties happening in DC with members of Congress. Like, we all saw that happen. There have been rumors. But now the Senate Twink is saying, I literally have names of other people who have done this. That is literally insane. But also, it's 2025, so at this point, nothing should surprise me anymore. Now, in looking at this press tour and this whole interview that he did, and the article is so funny, so you should go read the entire thing, but I can't help but wonder if he's doing this whole press tour and doing the interviews with New York Magazine and New York Post because at the time, he threw away his chance to capitalize on this sex scandal. Because if you guys remember from the previous episode, he cried victim. He said, oh my gosh, all this outrage is homophobia. He checked himself into a mental facility. He moved across the world to Australia to start a new life, and then wasn't happy and wasn't making any money. So then, a year later, he changed his Instagram name.
Jo, homofobia, aha, byl ten. Tam měl se s dalším chlapem.
Said a twink and tried to start an OnlyFans to kind of capitalize on it, but obviously that wasn't working. So now he's back in our faces trying to kind of rehash things, being very bold and very brazen about it, probably, in my mind, as a marketing strategy for his OnlyFans page. And listen, I am not promoting this in the slightest. You guys know how I feel about OnlyFans and sex workers, but I'm just saying, had he taken this approach a year ago, right after the scandal took place, he would probably be one of the biggest OnlyFans creators on the platform. He would be an icon in different parts of the world, and yet now he is having to crawl his way back to relevancy thanks to interviews like this, which, you know, are very entertaining to me, so I can't even be mad about it. Now, speaking of twinks, we need to turn our attention to the drag queen and the coalition that is called Trans is Nature, who, guys, they are just truly making a difference in the world, and they are doing that by hanging trans flags in national parks. And yes, you heard that correctly. Last Tuesday, this coalition of LGBTQ rock climbers under the name Trans is Nature hung a 55-foot trans flag at Yosemite National Park. I mean, guys, so brave. I mean,
Takhle vypadá trend, to jo, vlajka. Vidím poprvé. Já myslel, že oni mají ten rainbow kokotinu. Okay.
hanging trans truly changing the world. And guys, of course they did this. They did this incredibly brave thing to send a message to Donald Trump, the big bad orange man. And according to this USA Today article, they did this because they are, quote, done being polite. And thanks to my friends over at Ground News, I know that while this article is very left-leaning, it is also highly factual. Now, Ground News, as always, cuts through the noise with an unbiased perspective and shows both sides of every story, prioritizing honesty over
Ona umí
everything.
dobře tam
Their
házet
unique
ty
technology
reklamy.
even allows users to
Musím říct,
compare
že
how
fakt
different
umí
sides
dobře
of
tam
the
házet
corporate media
do
are
těch videí.
reporting on a certain story, making sure that you see all sides and truly stay informed. And from my perspective, they make sure that I stay on top of all the stories that I'm covering so that I can bring you the latest and most honest updates. Now, in addition to that, one thing that I love is that Ground News's blind spot feed brings you the stories that have gotten little to no coverage on either side of the aisle, making sure that you will always stay informed, instead of letting big tech or their algorithms decide what you see. So if you are truly ready to break free from media bias and stay informed with transparent news consumption, now is the time to join Ground News. And when you go to groundnews.com/Brett or scan the QR code on the screen, you can get the same
jsme
video
potřebovali
plan
image
that
Česku,
I
ty
use,
vole.
but for
From
nearly
left, from
half the
right.
price. That is
Není špatný, ne?
groundnews.com/Brett if you want to get unbiased news and hold the media accountable for only $5 a month. But guys, I don't want to just tell you about this insane story. Just take a look at the individual who went up there and hung this flag.
We carry the largest trans pride flag to ever be flown in a national park and unfurled it on the side of El Cap to prove a point that trans is natural. The Trump administration and transphobes.
Did you see what was written on that flag? Fly higher than hate. Oh, so profound.
Počkej, cože? Ukaž to ještě jednou.
Trump administration
Let this flag fly higher than hate.
and transphobes.
Did you see what was written on that flag? Fly higher than hate. Oh, so profound. Thank you.
That being trans is unnatural, but species that can transition sexes can be found on every continent and in every ocean on planet Earth. So call it a protest, call it a celebration. We are bringing elevation to liberation. So every trans person knows that they have people that love them in their corner. The people united will never be defeated.
Okay, well, the people united might never be defeated, but your flag will be defeated because this is completely and utterly ridiculous. And also, my favorite part of the entire video is where the
Já nevím, ale za to můžu dostat pokutu, ne? Když je to ještě National Park. A ještě, jelikož ty pomocníci jsou na tom videu, tak pravděpodobně dostanou pokutu i oni.
drag queen is like hugging that girl and is going, this is so natural. Meanwhile, he's in an entire full beat of drag queen makeup. That's literally the most unnatural thing I've ever heard of. You have this beautiful, rugged, natural landscape, and you're sitting here pretending to be a woman with insane makeup on. Like, I'm sorry, you're just not going to convince us otherwise. So kind of backing into this story, that individual that you saw on the screen, the one with the full beat of makeup, that is one of Time Magazine's Next Generation Leaders and National Geographic's Change Makers, and that would be drag queen Patagonia, aka Win Wiley. And guys, if that individual and that name sounds familiar, it is because at this rate, I don't even know how many episodes I have done about him. Like, genuinely, Patagonia seems to pop up every year around springtime in a different national park, in a different huge drag queen outfit, working with a different brand, simply to promote his agenda. And the agenda is always that trans is so natural. It is as natural as these national parks, and they deserve a place in the national parks. And it's so hilarious to me because no one is saying you don't have a place in nature. You are literally free to go hang that insane...
Já si stejně myslím, že tady ty trend, co jsou hodně viditelný, tak stejně potají jebají s holkama. 100%. 100%.
flag in Yosemite National Park, you are free to frolic in dresses and full makeup and film your videos in the middle of national parks. For years now, you work with brands like the North Face, so I'm sorry if I don't believe that you are genuinely, truly oppressed. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Now, the other ridiculous thing that we need to talk about that you probably heard in this video is that this coalition's mission is to promote the idea that transgenderism is naturally occurring in nature through various species. It's not just naturally occurring in humans. But guys, other animals and other plants change their gender literally for the sole purpose of reproduction. It is a scientific transformation. If you change your gender, you cannot reproduce. That is not something that happens naturally, no matter which way you cut it. That was a bad joke, but you get what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not like these fish and these plants are going off to surgeons to get a fake, beautifully made vagina. Beautiful is an overstatement. Your custom boutique vagina from your plastic surgeon. The last thing that I will say is that obviously this caused an uproar on social media, and everybody was pointing the finger at the park itself, at Yosemite, saying that they had okayed this, that it was a political statement that Yosemite was making, but that is not the case at all. I am here to defend Yosemite National Park. The park was quick to ask for the flag to be removed. I think it was already taken down, thank God, because Yosemite does not need to be embroiled in political debates about gender identity, because national parks truly are for everyone, regardless of your background, your gender, your age, whoever you are, you can go and enjoy it, and that should be the message. Now, on a more serious note, I think it is time that we turn our attention back to Diddy. Week 2 of the trial has ended, and we have a lot of updates. So as I said in my last Diddy episode, the defense was obviously going to make it seem like Cassie was a willing participant in all of this and all of the freak-offs, and that is exactly what they did. His team of lawyers, as we discussed, is just full of heavy hitters who play dirty, and they did not tone it down at all when they were cross-examining Cassie Ventura, who obviously, if you guys are following the story now, is Diddy's longtime ex-girlfriend. And throughout their cross-examination, they were focusing in on one specific thing, and that was the text messages between Diddy and Cassie. Here is one example. This is from 2012. Combs told Cassie that he wanted to FO one last time tonight using initials for freak off, FO. Cassie replied, what? And Combs said, you can't read? And then Cassie replied, I don't want to freak off.
Počkej, ještě. Jednou Combs told Cassie he wanted to FO, co znamená FO? Fako one last time, jo takhle. Okay. Initial for freak off, jo takhle. Cassie, what comes, read, and Cassie replied, I don't want to freak off for the last time, I want it to be the first time for the rest of our lives. Já pořád nevím, co si mám... Tohle je právě to, jakože ona... že s tou Cassie to je jako špatný, no, co si budem. Jakože nikdy jsem se nezastal toho zmrda Diddyho, ale jakože ona se k němu furt vracela, ty vole. Co tak jsem četl, tak oni se rozešli jako několikrát a ona se vždycky sama vrátila.
Off for the last time. I want it to be the first time for the rest of our lives. Here's another exchange they brought up. This one was from August of 2009. Combs asked when she wanted the next encounter to be, and she replied, I'm always ready to freak off. 2 days later, Cassie sent an explicit message, and he replied in eager anticipation. She responded, me too. I just want it to be uncontrollable. Combs' lawyers have insisted that all of the sex at the freak-offs was completely consensual. Later that year, however, she also sent Combs messages that she was frustrated with the state of their relationship and needed something more from him than just sex. So, obviously, we know that their relationship was incredibly sexual, we know that it was volatile, and we do have these texts. Like, everybody can see these, she talked about them in her cross-examination, and in my personal opinion, I feel like it's going to be hard for the defense to contradict everything that the prosecution has brought forward that demonstrates that he was blackmailing her and that she was terrified of him. And so using her text messages that show that she was saying that she likes the freak-offs doesn't necessarily mean that it was all completely consensual if she was truly scared for her life and actually being blackmailed in the way that we have been told that she was blackmailed. And of course, she's not going to push back against him or do anything to make him angry when we have now seen the kind of man that he is and the things that he would threaten to do to her. I mean, if the only evidence was her word versus these text messages, that would be one thing that would make it a lot more complicated. But we know at this point that it's not. And the prosecution only strengthened their argument about this blackmail, about this power imbalance, when Cassie's mom, Regina Ventura, took the stand. And she testified that Combs, in anger over one of his and Cassie's many breakups, threatened to release one of these freak-off videos of Cassie if they did not give him $20,000. And so her parents were trying to protect.
Tohle to je zajímavé, proč by zrovna Diddy potřeboval $20,000? Because he was angry she was dating Scott. Asi to bylo jako jen tak, no. Ale... Já pořád čekám na ty jména, ty vole. Protože on říkal, ještě předtím, než se šel sednout, že má ten list, že jo. Jako on nevím, myslím vyjmenoval, on je tam myslím přečetl. Ale zajímá mě, jako jestli se to nějak posune dál s těma lidma. Co se toho jako zúčastnili. A hlavně jako jak dlouho vůbec bude trvat celý ten trial. Že už je to asi měsíc, myslím.
Her, they frantically took out a $20,000 loan to send him the money. They never spoke to him. They just wanted to protect her. But like those are the types of things that he would do and what he would hold over her. So is that actually consensual? I think that is something that the jury is just going to have to decide. Now, in addition to Cassie's mother, we also saw some other new faces take the stand, including close friends and collaborators of Cassie's. But before we get into their testimony, which is just heartbreaking, I do want to take a break to tell you about my sponsor, 7 Weeks Coffee. Now, 7 Weeks Coffee is Alex's and my go-to coffee that we literally drink every single day. Now, as you guys know, we're very picky about what ingredients we bring into our home and put into our bodies, and 7 Weeks Coffee hits the mark. This coffee is mold-free, it is pesticide-free, it is shade-grown and low acid, and it is organically farmed. Not to mention, even better, they have an incredible mission that we love to support. 7 Weeks Coffee is America's pro-life coffee company on a mission to help fund the pro-life movement 1 cup of coffee at a time. They donate 10% of every sale to support pregnancy care centers and pro-life organizations across the country. And at this point, they have raised over $900,000 for these centers and have saved thousands of lives. And the reason why they're called 7 Weeks Coffee is because at 7 weeks, a baby is the size of a coffee bean. They truly make an incredible product, and I love that I can stand behind both the ingredients, the product, and the values of this incredible company. So if you are ready to make the switch, go to 7weekscoffee.com/Brett and save 15% off forever when you subscribe, plus get a free gift with your order. And exclusively for my viewers, use code Brett at checkout for an extra 10% off your first order. That is a 25% total savings on your first order plus a free gift. Just use code Brett at checkout. Now, in addition to my morning cup of coffee, the other staple of my morning routine is my skincare. And I am so excited to be promoting Nimi Skincare again. Now, if you guys have been around for the long haul, you probably remember I worked with them years ago as one of my first ever sponsors. It has been so amazing to watch their mission and their company grow. And since the last time we worked together, they launched a brand new, clean line of high-powered products made with ingredients that you can trust and feel great about putting on your body's largest organ, your skin. And just this month, they have introduced the beginnings of their body care collection. Now, I started using Nimi again at the beginning of this year after getting pregnant because my hormones obviously have been going crazy. I was getting terrible acne. I was struggling to keep my skin under control. And I decided that I should probably start washing my face with something other than just my micellar water. And they totally changed the game for me, and they got my skin back on track, literally, guys, within days. And Nimi Skincare is more than just skincare. Their company also represents amazing values, and their products are proudly made in the USA. So because of that, they're not forced to increase their prices when tariffs and costs rise, so you can always
Jak
trust
je
that
dlouhá
you
ta
are
reklama,
getting
ty
a
vole,
great
holka,
value. So
come
if
on.
you are ready to make the switch, take Nimi's simple skincare quiz on their website and get a skincare routine curated just for your skin type and concerns. Head on over to nimiskincare.com, that is Nimi skincare.com, and use code Cooper for 15% off your order. Your skin and your wallet will thank you. So going back to these new testimonies, here is one instance of abuse that her best friend witnessed, and she took the stand, and Morgan, her name, testified that the second incident took place in Jamaica in 2013, where they were on a group vacation. She said that while Cassie was using the bathroom, Combs became angry that she was taking too long and set out to find her. Morgan then allegedly heard guttural screams and ran to the hall to find Combs dragging Cassie outside by her hair. Outside, she allegedly managed to get up, and Combs then pushed her onto the ground, where she hit her head on the bricks. Morgan testified that she believed Cassie was knocked out, but her friend later ran into the woods barefoot. Morgan said that when she found Cassie, she hid in a ditch for what felt like hours while Combs searched the property for them. I mean, guys, at every turn, all the stories that we hear are horrifying. Like, I think we know now the kind of relationship that this was. But again, even though we're hearing all of these stories, I do want to clarify that this case isn't about abuse. It is about the racketeering. It is about sex trafficking. And so stories like this obviously give us insight into his character. They support everything else, but this isn't what he's being charged for. Now, in addition to these friends and Cassie's mom, a man named George Kaplan also testified, that is Diddy's former assistant. And this one actually does really give legs to the racketeering charge, because he would set up hotel rooms for Diddy, he would pick up drugs for Diddy, paying for all of them in cash, and he also testified that Diddy constantly threatened his job. And so what I'm seeing here is we are now moving outside of just Cassie. Obviously, this is where the lawsuit started. This is what really brought attention to everything that Diddy was doing. But again, it is going to get so much bigger than just this relationship. Now, this federal case does stem from Cassie's 2023 lawsuit, which we talked about last week. But even though this case is about a very particular set of charges, I do think that we should quickly look at the other civil suits that are up against Diddy. After Cassie's very public lawsuit and less than 24-hour settlement that, again, we talked about last week, 70 other civil lawsuits were filed. Now, to give you guys a timeline, Diddy's house was raided in March of last year, so this was 2024. In September, he was arrested and he was charged, and there were 9 lawsuits that were filed before his house was raided. There were 5 in between his house being raided and him being arrested, and then over 50 different lawsuits have been filed since his arrest. Now, around 5 of these lawsuits allege that the victim was a minor at the time of the incident. Most of these accusers are female, but there are quite a few men that have also come forward in these suits. And what has possibly been an even bigger conversation than anything else we're talking about is that some of these lawsuits are also against other celebrities, which is not the case in this federal lawsuit. They are not involved in Cassie and Diddy. This is just...
To je to stejný jako, že on tam šel nedávno, tam šel Kid Cudi, že jo, to cvičit. A pak prostě čteš někde ty komenty a oni prostě mu nadávají do sniče, ty vole. To je v kundě.
About Diddy. Now, the most notable of these lawsuits is the case that was brought against Diddy and Jay-Z for drugging and raping a girl when she was 16 years old. A third female celebrity who has not been named allegedly stood by and watched, but she was not included in that lawsuit. And this lawsuit has now been dropped. That came out in...
Jako to bylo to stejné jako to, že jo? Že Jennifer Lopez to měla jako hodně na začátku. Jsem taky potom zvědavý, jak se to vyklubí. Ale tohle to bylo dropnutý, jo. Okay.
December, at the beginning of December. Aaron Hall is involved in another lawsuit from a woman who alleges that the two of them, Diddy and Aaron, raped her, and Diddy then choked her. In another lawsuit, Diddy's first employee at Bad Boy Records, a music producer, is being accused of gang raping a 17-year-old girl with Diddy and another celebrity that has not been named. Rodney Jones Jr., aka Lil Rod, has accused Diddy of grooming him and then passing him off to actor Cuba Gooding Jr., who has already pleaded guilty to forcible touching in a previous case. And then, guys, this is even crazier to me. 2 of Diddy's sons are named in separate lawsuits against them and Diddy for sexual abuse. Those are his sons, Justin and Christian. Lucian Grange. This is...
Ale tak to bylo jasný, ne? To bylo jako 100%, že v tom pojedou i jeho synové. To je jako, to přece nemůžeš jako říkat, že to se teda divím, že to se stalo. To bylo úplně jasný. To bylo úplně, ale úplně jasný. Věřím tomu, že je i vzal, když jim bylo třeba 12, 13.
Sophia Richie's father-in-law, he is the CEO of Universal Music Group. He was also named as a defendant in a lawsuit for aiding and abetting Diddy's sex trafficking and racketeering, although his involvement was dropped from that specific suit. OBJ has been named.
You look easy to draw.
One of the most shocking lawsuits when a young woman claims that she was gang raped by Diddy, OBJ, and other men after she accused Diddy of killing Tupac. I mean, there's so much here. And so the public is thinking about all of these cases. We have read articles about all of this. And so even me, like going into this huge 8-week-long trial, I was like, oh my gosh, it's all coming out. This is everything. But it's not. Like, this isn't like Epstein, where there was a possibility for everything to come out in that one big case. It is just about Diddy and Cassie. And this has
No a by the way, neříkal náhodou Trump, že až ho zvolej jako prezidenta, tak jako první věc, co udělá, je to, že vydá ten list z Epsteinova ostrova. Je 1. června. Pořád nikde.
Understandably made this case very confusing because people, like myself, were mixing these civil suits with what he is being charged with right now federally. I mean, when Diddy was first arrested, we all saw the pictures of his notorious white parties. They began flooding the airwaves, and people were claiming that all the people who were in those photos that attended those parties were actually attending freak-offs. The white parties were the freak-offs. Everyone in the photos was implicated in all of these cases. I mean, similarly, everybody immediately started saying that Justin Bieber had been sex-trafficked. Photos.
Co tam bylo s tím Leonardem DiCapriem?
Of his notorious white parties. They began flooding the airwaves, and people were claiming that all the people who were in those photos that attended those parties were actually attending freak-offs. The white parties were the
Since from Diddy as their white party pics emerged, they were not freakos. Okay.
freak-offs. Everyone in the photos was implicated in all of these cases.
Okay, Leo.
I mean, similarly, everybody
Dízkáš.
immediately started saying that Justin Bieber had been sex trafficked by him. The internet began spiraling, quickly spinning rumors into truth. We had no idea what was going on, and from what I heard, just because obviously I had been talking to some people close to Bieber, based on what I have heard from that camp and what Bieber has now said in a public statement, he was not sexually abused by Diddy. And so I just want to say that here once and for all. Now I do want to take a step back because
Já nevím, no. Úplně se mi tomu nechce věřit. I když sice on to teda potvrdil, že teda, že ne, ale nevěřím tomu. A 100%, že tomu bylo 15, nebo možná 14, když byl u toho Diddyho a Diddy zrovna chodil s Jennifer Lopez, tak 100% si zajebal s Jennifer Lopez, když mu bylo 14.
we all saw the videos, we watched Justin grow up, and so I think we can say that, you know, was Justin put in uncomfortable positions as a young man? Yes, absolutely. Was he sexualized by the media and the music industry as a whole? Yes. Was he asked or pushed to engage in spiritually dangerous and immoral activities? Yes. Those aren't rumors. I've actually heard that from people, but he denies that even though that might have happened, he denies that he was a Diddy victim. Now, it's also important to note, kind of in light of talking about everything with Justin and how this industry operates, that Diddy is just the tip of the iceberg. And most people out there, including myself, do not believe that he acted alone, not just with his freak-offs, but with the degradation of this industry as a whole. I mean, think about all the names that we just mentioned in those 63 lawsuits. And guys, interestingly, there is one person that just keeps getting brought up time and time again, and he also just keeps getting away with it. And that man would be Clive Davis, the aging, very much aging co-founder of Bad Boy Records. Now, before we get into how insane this story is and giving you the backstory, I just need to paint a picture for you, because when all of this started, this was a very, very different time. So imagine that we are all in the 70s, and the government has just begun cracking down on organized crime because the RICO Act was signed into law in 1970. So why did this act come about? Well, the mafia had infiltrated all of the big industries, and the music industry for the mafia was a no-brainer, including jukebox plays, record sales, nightclub entry fees, and it gave mob bosses the ability to control and extort labels and artists through these avenues, including distribution through jukeboxes, control of the venues where artists got to perform, all of that. They had their hands in everything. And another part of this...
Jo, ale tak to je stejný jako to, že to je stejný jako tady v Česku. Myslím, že to byl těch 93, něco takového, když začali amatéři, že, což je prostě, to není OnlyFans, no, český, ale prostě sex seznamka. Tak vlastně jsem viděl, myslím, rozhovor s tím českým, s tím CEO, a on vlastně říkal, že když to vlastně začínalo, tak mu vyhrožovali jako to, no, že ho zabil jako ty ruští mafiáni, co byli tady v Česku a starali se o bordely. Tak je to potom jasný, no.
Was referred to as indies. Now, these indies were people, and they were people who were hired by labels to secure airplay for songs, often using cash and gifts, drugs, or other incentives that would get the radio stations to play these certain songs. And this was not something that the record labels were doing overtly. They had to do this through third parties because this was actually illegal. It was illegal to pay for airtime without disclosing it, and this was called payola. So now that you have that context, we can introduce you to Clive Davis. Now, this is the man that is behind some of the world's most iconic bands and artists throughout the entire music industry, and he is also the man behind Diddy's rise. I mean, this man has worked with everybody from Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Chicago, Santana, Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen, Aerosmith, Earth, Wind & Fire, Neil Diamond, my personal favorite. I used to fall asleep to him every single night growing up, Pink Floyd, Whitney Houston, Alan Jackson, Brooks and Dunn, Brad Paisley, Usher, Outkast, and Pink. But, you know, in the 70s, he was the music industry. If you were somebody who was working with Clive Davis, it was almost a sure bet that you were going to be successful. Now, Clive started his career at Columbia Records, and he quickly rose to the top because of his talent and his eye for music, and all thanks to Clive Davis himself. Columbia Records was a powerhouse in the 70s, and their revenue was up significantly. One article from around that time says that rock has moved from only 15% of Columbia's volume to more than 50%, and CBS record sales have risen from 170 million to 340 million each year. Davis, Clive Davis, was able to win over top talent by paying well and offering considerable artistic freedom. John Phillips of the Mamas and Papas said, quote, "He always sent the limousines and the flowers at the right time." So everything for Clive and Columbia Records was looking up. The music industry was changing daily, all thanks to Clive. And then in May, in 1973, Clive Davis was abruptly fired after a Columbia Records internal investigation. Now, Columbia has publicly stated that the reason for the termination of his contract early was that he was misappropriating funds. But everyone in the music industry who was clued in that knew Clive knew that it had to be more than that. Take a look at this Time article from 1973. They said, others in the records business where expense money is thrown around doubted that the CBS charges against Davis could be the full explanation. To them, the action against Davis seems unduly harsh in an industry that abounds in stories of much worse transgressions, chiefly the providing of drugs to rock groups and disc jockeys. Quote, "If we had somebody really important who wanted dope, we would probably give it to him," says the vice president of one of CBS's biggest competitors. I think
Byly
Davis
80
is
90,
taking the
vole. To je jasný, že tam byly drogy jak svině. To jako nikoho přece nemůže to, vole.
for everybody. Now, in addition to all of that and those theories, looking through news articles from around the time, it is very obvious that Columbia was being investigated for payola, as this internal investigation was happening with Clive Davis. In fact, here's a headline from that year that reads, "Clive Davis ousted, payola cover-up charge. Columbia Records president is fired from CBS amid allegations of misuse of funds and providing drugs to artists and disc jockeys." Now, the rumor at the time, and sort of still is that Columbia used Davis as a cover-up so that the company would not be investigated further. This man was the fall guy. They were basically saying there was nothing to see here. Yes, our president was funneling money, but that was just for personal reasons. Nothing to see here. He was most definitely not working with the mafia, doing payola, or supplying people with drugs. And guys, you also need to understand how big being charged with payola with something like this could have been. Like, Columbia Records would not have survived that scandal. And again, this was not something that was hush-hush. Another article from around the time reads that the government is probing an elaborate scheme in which Columbia and perhaps other record companies may have been bilked of many millions of dollars. Columbia Records alone reportedly lost $2 million. Investigators are trying to find out whether the mafia had got a firm foothold in the record industry or whether Columbia Records scandal was an isolated incident. Now, here is where the mafia ties really begin. So a month before Clive was fired, one of his employees, one of his close associates, was also fired for misappropriation of funds, and his office was interestingly sealed for investigation. And this man had been more directly linked to the mob, specifically the Genovese crime family. And it's all written about in another article from 1973. So this one reads, "The first rumors had begun to fly during, quote, a week to remember. David Winshaw, 52, vice president of artist relations at Columbia, had been busted. He had been locked out of his 12th floor office a couple of weeks ago, and there was talk about prostitution and drugs. The FBI, the rumors said, had invaded CBS's Black Skyscraper and seized files from Winshaw's office, and CBS had cordoned off the room and fired the 11-year veteran. Winshaw, it was said, was close to Clive Davis and was variously known around the company and in the business as Davis's royal procurer, or Clive's pimp, or the all-around Dr. Feelgood. He had, the hearsay went, been moved over to special projects and took care of conventions, providing any necessary entertainment for Columbia executives and favored guests. Now he, David Winshaw, unlike Clive, did serve a year in prison, and his story seemed to kind of die down there until 2021 when Winshaw gave another interview. And in this interview, he said that everyone knew he took the fall for Clive Davis. Federal investigators who had launched an ultimately fruitless search for evidence of payola would allege that Winshaw had conspired with a member of the Genovese crime family to defraud CBS of $75,000 through sham bills from non-existent companies, a scheme that earned Winshaw a 1-year jail sentence. Nobody has suggested that Davis knew a thing about the involvement of the mob, though skeptics contend that a micromanager like Clive Davis had to know about the invoices that Winshaw drafted. According to Winshaw, there is little doubt on the matter. Now 80 years old and living in Florida, he said in a brief phone interview that, quote, "Everyone knows I took the fall for Davis. How does a man run a bar mitzvah that he doesn't know about? The circumstances of his exit," Winshaw says, "ruined me, though he still admires Davis's talents. I have no animosity. The guy doesn't want to know me. That's fine." Looking back, some former colleagues say that CBS got spooked by the payola investigation and jettisoned Davis, hoping to mollify the government and stave off penalties that might jeopardize its broadcasting licenses. And guys, the reason why I did this entire entire history lesson on the music industry in the 70s and Clive Davis and Columbia Records is because it is simply so wild to me that while David served a year in prison for all of this, Clive walked away free and maintained his career. And then, many years later, in 1994, he fatefully started Bad Boy Records with none other than P. Diddy. Now, to bring it all back to the case at hand and the freak-offs, we don't know how involved Clive was with Diddy's affairs. We can just put it that way. But we do know that Clive was responsible for starting Diddy's career and that they were very close friends. And so it's fair and it's very valid for all of us to wonder why and how P. Diddy was able to get away with all of these crimes for so long and what led him down such a dark, twisted path. And it's just interesting, whether it's related to Diddy's cover-ups or not, that his mentor, his confidant, his close friend, his business partner, was tied to one of the biggest payola scandals in music industry history and has walked away scot-free from crimes, also including tax evasion, for his entire very long life. And I mean, hey, maybe Diddy just learned from the best. Now, while a lot of this is unverified, a lot of people think that it goes even deeper than that, even darker than that. A lot of people in the music industry have spoken out about this relationship. For example, Suge Knight, who is a rapper who is in prison for manslaughter, has claimed multiple times over the years that music executives, including Clive Davis, have used sexual abuse, drugs, and alcohol to control their artists. Take a listen to this clip from a recent interview he did with Chris Cuomo.
To me, that sounds like what I hear when people are talking about abusive situations, you know, hurt people, that someone was sexually abused, they wind up being a perpetrator. Is that what you're suggesting about Sean Combs, that he was sexually abused and he now sexually abuses?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think he repeat what was done to him. And like I said, if you look at Russell Simmons, you know the truth. Andre Rail, you know the truth. Clyde Davis, you know the truth. Jimmy Iovine, you know the truth. The industry is a quick business. It's been like that for a long time. And the casting couch is real, but it's for women and men.
And throughout this interview, which was done 7 months ago, he offered horrifying examples of what that looked like. For example, Knight claimed that Diddy was, quote, taught by the people before him, and he did to the younger people after him. Quote, it is an industry that, according to Knight, has a long history of sexually abusing and assaulting its newest members. He said one practice called an egg test went as follows. And just for warning, this is insane, but he says, quote, those guys pull their pants down and bent over. They stick the egg up their ass, their eggs break. They say they're not ready yet. They ain't put enough work in. This is...
Oh my fucking god. To se neví, jak je vajíčko tlustý, jo. Takhle je vejce tlustý? Jo, takhle je velký, že jo, přibližně. A takhle je asi tlustý. No. Oh my god. To nemyslíš vážně. Jau, ty kokot, jau.
Is Hollywood. And then he goes on to say that the only place where
This
you
is
would
Hollywood.
put in the work so that your egg wouldn't break was at these types of parties. I can't, it's like, guys, it's so insane. And yet we're hearing this from so many people. Like, at this point, it can't be a conspiracy that this is how Hollywood and these entertainment industries run. And guys, in every one of these stories, from people other than just Suge Knight, in every story, Clive Davis gets brought up. His influence even made its way to Sean Ryan's podcast. Now, of course, over the years, Clive Davis's team has denied all of these allegations. They say that he knew nothing, that he was never involved, and these days, he plays the role of the geriatric old man who just won't answer questions.
A lot of people are curious about the status of P. Diddy.
Status of what?
P. Diddy. Diddy.
Puppy. The status of puppy.
But as we've learned from Justin Bieber and others like him, the abuse...
Já nevím, no, jako víš co. On už je úplně brutálně starý. Skoro neslyší. I kdyby to reálně byla pravda, což asi jako na těch 99% je, tak co mu už můžeš udělat? Co mu reálně tomu člověku můžeš udělat, když je už na smrtelný posteli? Tam máš tak 2 roky max, ty vole.
Abuse and the blackmail and the control happening within the music industry and Hollywood runs...
A pak si říkáš, že karma existuje, vole. No, Já si tím nejsem jistý vždycky, když vidím tady to.
deep. And this story is still only getting started. So next week we will be back for another Diddy update because the trial is still ongoing, and also we haven't even gotten into the beef between Diddy, Tupac, Suge Knight, and Biggie that led to the murder of 2 of those men.
Moment, já si dělám kafe. Tak.
Digital dumpster fires. Strong words, but sometimes things don't go the way you plan. Now, I'm not going to say that these games are all going to come out and be bad. Hell, I'm not even going to say that these games are all going to come out. But hi, folks, it's Falcon, and today on Game Ranks, we're talking about 10 big upcoming games that are in a rough state. We're starting off with number 10, the Knights of the Old Republic remake. The original coder is basically holy scripture for RPG nerds. BioWare, absolutely at its prime, lightsabers, morality sliders, a hell of a twist. So naturally, when they announced the remake a few years ago, it was met with unholy levels of hype and then nothing. Delays, rumors of chaos, and we don't really have anything to show for it at this point. It was originally announced back in 2021 on the flashy teaser. It was supposed to be this glorious revival by Aspyr. As we all know, Aspyr has, a mixed bag in terms of a history. Apparently things went the direction people didn't want them to go in. Well, anyway, the whole situation with not only Aspyr, but Saber Interactive and Embracer, it's all near unintelligible. Aspyr became a subsidiary of Saber Interactive, which was at the time a subsidiary of Embracer Group. Embracer Group divested from Saber, selling it off to the tune of $500 million. However, Embracer retained Aspyr for some reason, and Saber walked with the Coda remake. Back in March, Saber confirmed that all of its projects are still in development and there's no cancellations, but it did not mention any progress or anything. According to everything I can find, they basically had to restart development entirely. So to say there's a shit show that has happened over the course of the last several years regarding this Knights of the Old Republic remake would be a vast understatement. We do not know the extent, but it's vast. What we know is absolutely a game that is in a rough state. And number 9 is Marathon. Remember when Bungie made Halo and everyone's like, wow, this is a studio that can do no wrong. Fast forward to 2025 and they're rebooting Marathon. Don't know exactly why. But they decided to make a PvP only extraction shooter. But I don't know. I don't really understand the thinking behind that. And then throw in the alleged art theft and this one's gotten pretty spicy. So of course,
Tomuhle pořád prostě nerozumím. Víš co, oni ne jako, že by ukradli 3D asety, že by vykradli prostě, já nevím, charakter, design a tak podobně. Ale oni ukradnou ikonografii. Jo? Oni normálně ukradnou ikonografii. Ten styl toho designu, ten už je tady roky, to prostě to nevykradeš. To je prostě to, co tady je to prostě další styl. Ale prostě, že oni vykradli jako ikony. A že jo, čísla spacing, prostě, že to je všechno stejný. To je fakt jako 1:1, což taky jako... To fakt. Tomu prostě nerozumím. Proč by si něco takového kradl? Když to máš, vole, za 10 minut nadezejnovaný a bude to vypadat jinak. Víš co? Tomu prostě nerozumím tomuhle. To jsem fakt jako neporozuměl. Taková píčovina. Taková sračka prostě. Na který se spálíš. A to, že oni už mají takovéhle problémy několikrát, že jo? Že v Destiny oni ukradli ten fan art, že jo? Udělali z toho normální prostě to bosse, nebo co to byl, myslím, že to byl boss Destiny. A to bylo asi víckrát, to bylo myslím 3krát nebo něco. Že 3krát, no, taky udělali. Ach můj bože.
Gotten pretty spicy. So according to a Games Radar report, Marathon was gonna come out last year, has got pushed to this year, mostly because Bungie's dev team is supposedly struggling with the game's core mechanics. Translation, that means they cannot agree on what the hell it's supposed to be. Basically, it's being said that there's a lack of focus and the studio is bleeding talent. And I mean, we've talked about that elsewhere on the channel. It's a problem. The whole deprofessionalization thing. Check out the What the Hell's Going On with Ubisoft video we did not long ago for more info on that. Now, I am not one to advocate for intellectual property, but the art theft thing is... A former Firewalk Studios dev, somebody who worked on Concord, is saying that Marathon is suffering from this similar soulless studio project syndrome. Which, I mean, yes, exactly. That's the exact problem. Why does Marathon exist? Who cares? I cannot imagine why anyone would care. I'm not excited for Marathon, and it doesn't seem like Bungie is particularly either. And number 8, it's Mind's Eye. Hey, did you know that cinematic is a synonym for not ready? So this was the next big thing from Leslie Benzies, the ex-GTA producer. It is good.
No počkej, ale tady to má vyjít, vole, tenhle měsíc.
Gonna release soon. It's set for June 10th, and it aims to blend the storytelling of Cyberpunk 2077 with the open world chaos of GTA. But despite the imminent launch, we've really only seen the polished trailers. We haven't seen much in the way of actual gameplay, and we're all kind of nervous about stuff like that. In a lot of games, they show us not the game, but what they want us to think the game is, and then it's not. We've covered more than a few games that have turned out to be total trash, slop, after doing this exact move, and I mean, early previews aren't exactly helping. A lot of reports.
Co to bylo tady? Game trailer, actual game.
I mean, early previews aren't exactly helping. A lot of reports are saying the game feels unpolished, bad driving mechanics in it, bad enemy AI. Apparently, playtesters have recommended delaying the release, but we're also so close to the release, I don't know if they can. And then throw in the fact that it's connected to Everywhere, which is this platform that allows user-generated content. It's an ambitious thing, but also it raises questions about focus and what they're really trying to do here. Is it too many things? I think it's probably too many things. Unless they pull off some kind of miracle a la No Man's Sky, I am definitely worried that this one's going to be remembered more for marketing missteps than gameplay. I think it's probably too many things. Unless they pull off some kind of miracle a la No Man's Sky.
Počkej, to vždycky je to traileru, jak týpek střelí do země, do píči.
No Man's Sky.
Vidíš?
I am definitely worried that this one's going to be remembered more for marketing missteps than gameplay. At number 7 is Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. Wowie.
Já to nerozumím, ale tohle to už je víckrát, ty vole. Že vždycky, vole, máš trailer, nebo máš game preview třeba od nějakýho jako game review magazínu, jako třeba IGN a tak. A vždycky ten gameplay, to je, jak kdyby to hrála v opice. Proč to dělají, ty vole? Ať zaplatí nějakýmu týpkovi, který umí hrát, ať on to zahraje, vole, a on týpek potom udělá na to review. To je hrozný, to se nedá koukat, ty vole.
If there were an award for most dramatic development saga, Bloodlines 2 would be a frontrunner. This was announced back in 2019. It's a sequel to a cult classic, and it has endured more twists and turns than a soap opera. Indeed, we thought Twilight was the thing that made vampires look like a soap opera. No, it is Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 development. This game was originally being developed by Hardsuit Labs. The project faced significant setbacks, including the controversial firing of the narrative lead Brian Mitsoda in 2020. That situation deteriorated to a point where Paradox Interactive considered canceling the game altogether, but in a surprising turn, development was handed over to the Chinese Room, the developer known for narrative-heavy titles like Dear Esther. Now, after years of uncertainty, Bloodlines 2 is slated for release in October. The developers are claiming the game is functionally complete and they're focusing on bug fixing and performance enhancements. Honestly, that sounds pretty positive. The Chinese Room is a pretty competent developer as far as those types of titles go, but Bloodlines 2 is, I mean, it's definitely more complex than Dear Esther. I do think out of some of the ones on this list, this one has probably more potential to not be a disaster, but man, it has been through hell. At number 6, it's Fable, the reboot that has been rebooting since 2020. For those who are unfamiliar, the whimsical British RPG series, it's known for letting you kick chickens and make morally questionable choices, I guess. They announced a reboot in 2020. It was supposed to be a triumphant return to Albion, but yeah, it keeps getting delayed. The train's always just around the corner, as they say. It was slated for a 2025 release. It has been pushed back to 2026. Xbox Game Studios head Craig Duncan is saying the extra time is to ensure that it's a high-quality experience. But, so, the game's being developed by Playground Games, which, if you're familiar, they're known for the Forza Horizon series. And, oh yeah, the game is being developed on the Forza Tech engine, which is a racing game engine, because this developer makes racing games, not Fable, a narrative-driven RPG. Now, in all seriousness, I suspect Fable's probably going to be good when it comes out. This is another one of those I do think probably will end well, and it's actually possibly because of Playground.
Jako vypadá to dobře. A jelikož je to od developera, který dělá jenom racing hry, tak si myslím právě to, že si dá tak 6x, 10x víc záležet než jiný developer. Takže jakoby ta šance toho, že to bude dobrý, je hodně velká. Pokud to teda vůbec vydají, že? Protože je plno her, na kterých studia dělají několik let a nikdy prostě nevyjdou, že?
In experience with this type of game that I think it's probably going to be good. Like, they have a lot to prove in doing it. I have no idea why they were assigned this title, and I think they realize that if they screw it up, that's going to be pretty bad for them. And I think that the slow development's probably due to that, more or less, rather than it being due to a lack of interest or it switching hands a lot of times or stuff like normal development hell stuff. It's really just these guys haven't made a game like this. And I think that actually could be a good thing because, again, these people have a very good reputation, but that doesn't mean it's not in a rough state. At number 5 is Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time remake. I've made fun of this multiple times, not because I don't want it to come out. I actually very much do. I love Prince of Persia. I love Sands of Time. I would really love being able to easily play it with a few quality of life updates and better graphics. Getting this thing to run on a modern computer isn't always straightforward. I've had issues in the past. I love Sands of Time. It's such a good game. You're best off emulating it. Don't even mess with buying it. And I'm giving you the frustrated wings up, don't do it, look here. And that's pretty much the same thing Ubisoft has been doing for several years now. Prince of Persia Sands of Time was announced in 2020, and it was planned to be released in 2021. The initial reveal was met with criticism over its graphics, though, and Ubisoft delayed it. In May 2022, they handed development over to...
To bylo hrozný. Já jsem o tom slyšel, že teda bude nový Prince of Persia, tak jsem si říkal, kurva jo, konečně. A pak, vole, to, co ukázali. To bylo jak PlayStation 2, ty vole, grafika.
to Ubisoft Montreal, who is the original developer. Since then, the project was restarted from scratch entirely, and the focus is now on quality and fidelity. One of the latest updates scheduled to release in March 2026, which, cool, but A, is that going to happen? I'd bet no. But B, man, why not just hand it to Ubisoft Montreal in the first place? Why not? This was supposed to be a 1 year in between announcement and release game. 1 year. That means it had been in development prior to the announcement, but it's been 5 years. And number 4 is Star Wars Eclipse, which was revealed at the Game Awards back in 2021. Quantic Dream, you know, the guys who made Detroit Become Human and Heavy Rain, The Quest to Find Sean! I really love that shit. Anyway, this is a narrative adventure set in the High Republic era. Basically, it's a Quantic Dream game set in the Star Wars universe, and it's gonna supposedly have a branching storyline with multiple playable characters, blah, blah, blah. It's been 4 years, and 2 years ago, Quantic Dream's VP of Marketing, Lisa Pendes, I don't know how to say that last name. But anyway, she described the game's development status as simmering, which, I mean, fine if you're rendering a broth, but that is not what game development is like. I mean, Quantic Dream has said Star Wars Eclipse is progressing well, but also they haven't really given any updates, nothing substantial anyway, and certainly haven't given out a release date.
Jako poslední update byl 2023. Jako, to si budeme hrát trvá dlouho, fakt jako udělat, no. Pokud nejseš Ubisoft. Ale tady to přece nemůžeš udělat i z marketingového hlediska, prostě, že ty představíš nějakou hru a pak o ní přestaneš mluvit třeba 3 roky. To fakt? To je úplně 100%, že se něco stalo.
Date, which without even an estimate of a release date, I mean, that's not great because most games have an estimated release date. So if we get any news on Simmering Wars Eclipse, we'll let you know. And number 3 is Hightail, a game that has been coming soon since the Obama administration. So yeah, it's been about a decade of development. There was a trailer that dropped in 2018. There's no beta, no release date. And I mean, it's a game that looks like Minecraft. It's not like this is some expensive and massively complex AAA development thing. And Hypixel is now under Riot Games. So like, I think safe to assume there is actually a game. And they do release development updates. The latest was a spring 2025 update where they talk about internal playtesting and progress on core systems and stuff. But there's no public beta or concrete release window or anything. The community behind this game, their patience is wearing fairly thin, though. A Reddit post titled Hightail, nearly a decade of development, still no beta, what's going on? That kind of captures the mood, I would say. They're tired of the vague updates.
Nearly
I mean, how can you be a
Minecraft.
decade in and being like, we're making progress on core systems like movement and combat? It's a decade in, and your game is like just a notch above Minecraft level graphics. And Minecraft was not like great graphics or anything back when it was originally released. In fact, that was the appeal of why so many people kind of, you know, jumped in on the Minecraft aesthetic in terms of like people making what a lot of people call copycat games, but I would say adjacent games, because this game doesn't look like it is Minecraft exactly. But that aesthetic was widely accepted, and it's a lot easier than doing hyper-realistic graphics. So if you don't have to like make hyper-realistic graphics, why are you working on core systems like movement and combat a decade in? And number 2 is Squadron 42, the single-player campaign of Star Citizen. Squadron 42, I mean, is basically always almost ready. Star Citizen is, I mean, it's its own unique beast.
No počkej, ale tohleto má vít, ne? Tady ten rok, nebo ne? Počkej, to je 4 dny nazpátek, co to nahrál, to video. Jo, tam byla ta kontroverze vlastně, že on vytáhli dalších, myslím, že 800 milionů a hra pořád není ready, tak vím. No a pak nikde nic, okay.
I have to tell you it's almost ready, but Squadron 42 it's a single player game. It has a finite scope. It has all of the actors' performances in it already. Mark Hamill, Gary Oldman, Gillian Anderson. They did that stuff well over a decade ago, and it's 2025. In October 2023, the developer called it feature complete, saying they were entering the polishing phase. But by late 2024, they said, yeah, the release has been pushed to 2026. That's an 11-year delay. At CitizenCon, the thing that they do for a game that's not released because they've taken in hundreds of millions of dollars and they have to have something. But at CitizenCon, they showcased over an hour of gameplay. And yes, the visuals are impressive and the sequences are cinematic, but the demo's pretty linear. It doesn't really have anything groundbreaking going on in it. So, like, yeah, let's say they do release it in 2026. It's kind of just like almost a AA looking game with like way better graphics. And I'm using AA not in the adventurous experimental sense, but the licensed game from 2006, except it's not a licensed game. And finally, at number 1, it's Judas, Ken Levine's narrative Lego project that he's been building forever. The guy behind BioShock, Ken Levine, basically shut down Irrational Games and started Ghost Story Games. Seems like it was essentially unnecessary to do, because it seems like they're just making the next Irrational Games game. The game was actually announced in 2022, which was after a very long period of silence where Ghost Story Games never released anything. They kind of gestured at various things from time to time. And it was originally going to come out in March 2025. Obviously, it's May 2025 now, and we don't know anything about what's happening with this damn game. Levine's management style is apparently a large issue. He tends to reboot things and shift directions a lot. That happened to BioShock Infinite as well. It led to an amazing game. In fact, all of the BioShock games, including the one that Ken Levine wasn't involved in, have similar stories. They go off in a lot of different directions and they turn out pretty cool. And I have a feeling Judas is going to be that if it ever comes out. Levine's shared some insights into the game's design philosophy. He wants the narrative to respond dynamically to player choices. So, like, imagine Breath of the Wild, but it's not just, like, mechanics the player is more in control of, but it's the story responding in the same way Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom did mechanically. It's a really ambitious, to say the very least, project, but that's kind of the story of Ken Levine's life. He's very ambitious and he does insane stuff, but at what cost? I do hope that it does come out because I have a feeling out of all of the games on this entire list, this one has the most potential, but we'll see. What do you think? Leave us a comment, let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them.
Zajímavý, no. Vždycky to. Musím to nějak vypnout, ty vole. Že jak vždycky přidáš ty emoty, tak se mi to tady ukazuje i v chatu. Takže edit emote. Pak když přidáváš, vole, jich hodně, tak to mám tady úplně zaspomněný.
There is something so validating hearing that your worst assumptions about AAA publishers is actually true. Like, EA apparently referring to RPG players as cave-dwelling nerds that'll show up for anything that they make. That's not a joke, by the way. That was their strategy. And with Dragon Age the Veilguard now, play publishers is actually true. Like, EA apparently referring to RPG players as cave-dwelling nerds that'll show up for anything that they make. That's not a joke, by the way. That was their strategy. And with Dragon Age the Veilguard now, well, you cave-dwelling nerds are bad people. They got a term for you now. You're an anti-fan, scum of the earth. Just because you didn't want to show up for a game that didn't speak to you. What's really frustrating for me is that these guys are so close to the truth, but they just won't see it. Probably because they don't want to see it, but they see the fans walking away, they see the frustration, they see the complaints, they see the back.
Co jsem chtěl, tak budu... OK.
Flash, and Instead of asking why, they just write it off as
A kolik jich tam je? Máš někde číslo, kolik jich tam je? Mě zajímá, kolik jsi jich přidal, ty vole.
hate, or they write it off as toxicity. Like, players want games to fail just for the hell of it. People are sick and tired of feeling like they are getting pushed out of a hobby that they love. They are sick and tired of being insulted for wanting a game to represent the name that's behind it. They keep wanting to act like it's the audience that's changed and not these games. EA is going through it right now. Dragon Age the Veilguard flopped catastrophically. Apex Legends is swirling the drain right now. They're having issues over there. They have had more layoffs, more game cancellations, yet we still have people that want to point the finger at the audience and say they are the problem here. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the industry's exhaustion with players that want to see games fail for absolutely no reason at all, apparently. Big changes going on at EA and what these companies really think of you. But before that, a word from today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by boot.dev, and I actually got way more into this than I thought that I would. I gave their demo a shot, and the entire experience is built around a text-based adventure game, which means that you're actually using the code, not just reading it. I started with Python, learning syntax, debugging basics, and what really helped was the way that they break things up. Short quizzes, short videos, a built-in AI assistant that gives you hints without spoiling the answer, and constant feedback to make sure you're actually learning. And it never really drags. The pace is really nice. Boot.dev uses game design to keep you hooked. XP, quests, achievements, global leaderboards. It's got everything other than loot boxes. But the best part, you're writing real code from day one. Honestly, from moment one. They've got courses in Python, JavaScript, SQL, Go, C, and even Linux or Git. You can preview all lessons for free in read-only mode, and if you upgrade, you can unlock the full interactive experience, progress tracking, solution guides, and even access to their community Discord. So go to boot.dev and try the courses for free. If you like what you see, then use my code LegendaryDrops to get 25% off for your first year on an annual plan. Thank you to boot.dev for sponsoring today's video. Now, I think that most of us have always had a creeping suspicion about how AAA executives really view their audiences. We joke about it, we speculate, we'll spin up some of our own theories, but every so often, someone from the inside always says the quiet part out loud, and it's somehow way worse than you would have expected. In the ongoing crash out around Dragon Age the Veilguard, former BioWare lead writer David Gator gave an interview to Games Radar that offers us a rare glimpse into just how out of touch these companies actually are. In an article titled, this is so good, by the way, Dragon Age Maestro says EA spoke about a hypothetical nerd cave full of diehard RPG fans who would always show up so you didn't have to try to appeal to them. The article reads, a Dragon Age veteran says that EA liked to refer to a cave where RPG fans who could be trusted to buy anything that the genre threw at them would dwell. Speaking with Games Radar Plus, BioWare veteran David Gator explained that before he left BioWare, his taste had become somewhat old-fashioned in EA's eyes. I was very vocal on the Dragon Age team, he says. I was always trying to push for our...
Já bych chtěl strašně vidět, jak tady ty velký gaming companies jako makají, ty vole. Že oni jsou fakt jako out of touch, ty vole, s tím herním světem. Protože že to stejný s tím Ubisoftem a tak. To je jako neskutečný. Teď přesně takovýhle věci, vole, takým věcem si vyvaruješ jenom, když na pár hodin zapneš nějakou hru a víš, jakoby, co chceš hrát sám. Myslím, že ty lidi, vole, poslední dobou, co jsou v těch velkých studiích, tak nehráli, vole, žádnou videohru minimálně 15 let, ty kokot.
Traditional mechanics, and that wasn't very welcome in the EA sphere. He said that EA considered those mechanics, the kind that shaped Dragon Age Origins, to be slow and cumbersome rather than the actiony and slick presentation that the studio was being pushed toward. That meant that Gator's views were often not very welcome despite his long tenure at the...
Ale hlavně, když máš velkou franchise, že jo, jak je třeba Warzone tak ty developeři si taky říkají, že jo, že to je jenom něco uděláme, oni stejně přijdou, ty hráči. Protože už je to tak jako velký, že už je úplně jedno, jestli vlastně použijeme úplně stejný framework, použijeme úplně stejný asety, co jsme použili minulý rok. A jenom tomu dáme nový jméno a novou nálepku ceny.
Studio and work on many of its most famous RPGs. That was partly because he says EA didn't think that the traditional RPG audience was one worth focusing on. He claims that overseers referred to the mechanics being pushed as in the cave. The cave, he explains, was where nerds went. The nerds were in the cave. You made an RPG, and the nerds in the cave would always show up for an RPG because it was an RPG. That devotion to their genre in EA's eyes meant that you didn't have to worry about the nerds. You didn't have to try to appeal to them. You had to worry about the people who weren't in the cave, which was the audience they actually wanted, which was much larger. Yeah, that didn't work out all that well for you, did it? It is hard to believe how arrogant this mindset is. The idea that your existing audience somehow doesn't matter, that they'll just show up no matter what and you don't need to appeal to them. This is so disrespectful and so backwards. No wonder players today are saying that AAA games are getting worse and developers aren't listening to them. It's quite literally their strategy. That is not how you grow. That is not how any successful industry treats its customers or thinks about its customers. Imagine if Mustangs became minivans, McDonald's sold tofu cubes instead of fries, or Disney World turned into an art museum. You're supposed to build outward from your base. Use the trust and consistency that you have earned to reach new players. That's how communities grow. That's how momentum works. You don't scrap the foundation, you expand on it. But what EA is describing is the opposite. You're chasing customers that you don't have while you're pushing away the ones that you do, prioritizing this theoretical market over the real one that you've already built. And when that new crowd doesn't show up, you're going to be left with nothing because, well, the people that would have carried your game are already gone. That's the part that never adds up for me. Serving your audience and expanding it are not competing goals. They are the exact same goal. You serve the audience so that you can expand it. But I guess when you're chasing record profits every year, a loyal fan base just becomes a static point on a graph to these people. You know, suddenly everything starts to make sense here. I have been struggling to figure out why these companies act blindsided when their games flop. People are confused about Avowed, they're stunned by Assassin's Creed Shadows, shocked by Dragon Age the Veilguard, but from where I'm standing, and probably where anybody else is who didn't buy those games, the answer couldn't be any more clear. The core audience was not respected. The games or the studios changed. They didn't show up. Simple as that. That's the pattern. That's what nobody at the top seems willing to admit. And it blows my mind that these guys cannot see what is sitting right in front of them, because in that same interview that they openly admit that they saw EA talking about nerds in a cave as a built-in audience that they didn't have to worry about, Gator then pivots to talking about anti-fans, people who root for games to fail well before they launch. In an article written by Steve Bonifield, a PC gamer, titled, "They are very determined suddenly to see your game fail," former Dragon Age writer calls out anti-fans who bet on games failing before launch. He writes, "We've seen it happen time and time again, a subset of players and content creators that catch wind of a detail that they don't like in a project, and they make it their personal mission to spend the lead up to the launch bashing the game as much as humanly possible. Sometimes..."
Je to tak, no. A nejvíc za to může kdo? Asmongold. On je vedoucí našeho klanu.
They'll claim victory over sales flops like Concord and Dragon Age the Veilguard, and otherwise they'll pretend like nothing ever happened when a targeted game reviews and sells well like Assassin's Creed Shadows. The difficulty is if suddenly you end up with anti-fans, they turn from what you want, fans who would go out and spread word of your game and get people interested, said Gator, but if you get anti-fans, they do the sort of opposite. They are very determined suddenly to see your game fail as a sort of lesson to others who would make games of the same type, right? And that honestly these days, there is that sort of element present in almost all fandoms, but it has always sort of been there for RPGs in particular. Gator went on to explain that he's seen fandom culture exacerbate the problem. More and more fandoms are making the things that they are fans of integral to their identity, and if it's integral to their identity, anything that affects it or insults it insults them, he said. So they are so invested in making it what they imagine that, like I said, if they turn into an anti-fan, suddenly their personal investment is seeing that fail, or seeing the developers who made that decision punished. What Gator is describing here is not some sort of sudden cultural phenomenon. It is not...
Jako na jednu stranu zase chápu, že ty jako developer chceš jakoby i tu hru posunout nějakým třeba dalším směrem, že jo. Chceš ji jakoby dál někam jako víc. A nechceš si úplně do toho kecat nějakou komunitou. Ale zase zároveň jakože plno tady těch studií dělá to, že tam serou vole woke píčoviny a vole samý trans a tady ty kokotiny. prostě politiku do toho serou a pak se divějí, že tu hru nikdo nechce hrát.
Not new. It is the inevitable byproduct of a decade spent taking your audience for granted. These anti-fans that he's calling out, they didn't start that way. These were regular players, supporters, people that used to show up early, buy in early, give benefit after benefit after benefit of the doubt until they couldn't anymore. What are players supposed to do when the studio behind a franchise that they love no longer makes the thing that they actually love? What happens when a publisher sees loyalty not as something to be rewarded, but as something to be exploited? You get resentment, you get skepticism, and you start to see people that want to see you fail. They want to see your games fail, not because they hate the concept, but because they hate what it represents now. Because watching it succeed would mean validating the worst version of what that series has become. Do you want people to remember the Veilguard or Origins? It's not a hard question. A lot of that resentment is earned. These players were pushed aside in favor of mass appeal, labeled as toxic and outdated for wanting what they used to love in these games, then blamed when those games flopped. They were treated like they were in a cave, that their feedback didn't matter, that the real audience was somewhere else waiting to be won over. And when that audience didn't show up, it wasn't their marketing strategy that was getting questioned. It was the players. Again, the industry doesn't want to admit, but a huge part of this so-called anti-fandom is not malicious. It is disillusioned. It is people who have been burned way too many times and have finally stopped hoping for these games. And now, instead of trying to rebuild trust, these companies treat them like they're a liability. They pull back communication. They blame the community. They act like the backlash is the disease when it's clearly the symptom. This entire idea that every fandom is too self-invested, too reactionary, or too fragile, maybe. I could probably see that in some cases, but the part that nobody wants to talk about is how this happened. It wasn't because people started building identities around these games. It's because studios started stripping out the identity from their games themselves. And when you remove the soul of a series, the only thing that you're going to have left is its name. And when that name doesn't deliver, yeah, people are going to take that personally, because at this point, it is personal. I mean, IGN just published a piece on Dragon Age the Veilguard, talking to one of their voice actors who had said that she was absolutely devastated by the backlash. Not disappointed, not surprised. Devastated by the backlash. She said that she thought that this was just BioWare being more BioWare, a line in and of itself that tells you everything that you need to know. But what really stands out is how she framed the player's response. She said that a lot of people kind of wanted to see it fail, or wanted to see BioWare fail, either because they are really bad people on the internet. And that is the moment that this conversation dies. Not because players aren't angry, they definitely are, but this isn't hate, it's rejection. It's players drawing a line and saying, you lost us. And instead of listening, the response is always to label them as bad faith actors and close the door. And IGN, they ran with it. They didn't question the framing. They didn't push back. They turned it into another culture war headline.
A tak
the
IGN,
only
ty
reason
vole.
that this game stumbled was because of bigots and trolls. Never mind the
To je jenom
full writing,
debilové
the brain
poslouchají
dead
IGN.
combat, the flat characters outside of maybe two. Never mind the studio's own handling. Never mind the audience that they've spent a decade pushing out. You know, it's actually funny, and it goes to show how lopsided this industry is. But the article actually includes a character tier list, except the lowest rating that you can give a character is a B. You literally cannot criticize this game, not even hypothetically. This is what happens when companies and media stop asking what went wrong and start asking who to blame. And right now, they're blaming the audience. Again, Dragon Age gained its popularity through its mechanics, its narrative, and its mature themes. But slowly, over the years, they chipped away at everything that was Dragon Age and then turned it into a game with brain-dead action combat and bad writing. Of course the players turned against you. Of course they hate the game, and they hate you for it because you used them to try to get to somebody.
Jako víš co, jestli vole, ty game developeri z těch velkých studií chodí na IGN koukat na reviews ostatních her, aby zjistili, vole, co je populární, tak pak je jako jasný, proč ty hry stojí tak za píču poslední dobou.
Somebody else, they weren't worth anything to you anymore, and you ruined something that they love. How is that a foreign concept? I don't understand how a single one of these companies has not figured this out yet. It is fine for these games to change and evolve, but you have to respect the core audience. They have to be held sacred. You are nothing without these guys. Final Fantasy is another great example of this. I loved Final Fantasy 16. I even enjoyed Final Fantasy 15. But those games struggled to meet whatever their sales targets were because they left the core audience behind, a core audience that still exists. You do not have to change genres or gut beloved games just to be able to reach a wider audience. It is just
7 z 10,
not
jo no.
necessary. Look at Expedition 33. That game is unapologetically inspired by Legend of Dragoon and Final Fantasy VIII. You can see it all over the entire game. Maybe not for some of my younger viewers, but I definitely can. And it tapped into an audience of turn-based enjoyers who then went out and raved about it and led that game to be...
Já pořád o tom přemýšlím, že bych si to fakt zahrál, kurva. Ta 33, vole, vypadá skurveně dobře. A já pořád nevím, jestli by mě to bavilo. A hlavně je to docela dlouhý. No.
Purchased by a much wider audience. Stop worrying about who you don't have. Worry about who you do have. You know, I was thinking about this the other day, and this might feel like a little bit of a tangent, but I promise that it's not. But, you know, after a while, I wrote it down right here. The core audience isn't there to sustain these games anymore because of the direction that they've gone in. So you've left those guys behind. EA has said it themselves that they took that audience for granted and that they imagined that.
Já myslím, že už to on dohrál, ne? Myslím, že tam bylo nějaký video, že poslední boss, nebo že tohle je ten pravý poslední boss.
They'd be there no matter what. But one of the things that I think that has really put power in our hands is actually through one of their own cost-cutting measures. It's because they got rid of pre-order bonuses. Without pre-order bonuses, you no longer have early investors, people that feel like they are dedicated to buy that game, even if there might be some type of bad buzz around it before the game comes out. We have no reason whatsoever to pre-order games today. And because of that, you are fully, completely reliant on first impressions and day one sales. And if those two things don't hit, game's cooked. Simple as that. We have all of the power now because of that. And I think they're starting to figure that out. EA is finally having to come to terms with the consequences of their own actions of ignoring that so-called cave-dwelling audience they once believed would be there for them forever.
2 týdny, no. Takže já bych to hrál tak, vole, 4. Možná 5.
With Veilguard falling flat and a projected 40% drop in net bookings for Apex Legends, a game that has lost more than half of its player base in just 2 years.
Už dávno vyjde Ark? No právě, no. Jako takhle, jestli Ark nevyjde příští týden, tak to zahraju. Protože reálně nebude co hrát. Tam jediné, co bude, je ta beta toho Chrono Odyssey, který stejně pravděpodobně bude trvat jenom víkend nebo maximálně týden. Ale myslím si, že to bude jenom víkend. I když oni říkali, v tom interview říkali, že chce, aby to ty lidi pořádně otestovali. A během víkendu to pořádně neotestuješ takovou hru, podle mě. No, záleží na tom kontentu, no. Ale jako je dost možný, že že by to mohlo být aspoň týden, ta beta. A bude PC, ale už nestíhám, takže pokud to actually nevyjde, tak budu mít čas. Co chceš upgradenout? Součástky. To skočilo během 1 roku, jo. O 200k. Apex je dobrý, no, jenom tam je prostě strašný problém s cheatama. Tam je neskutečně, to už je jak skoro CS, ty vole.
Years, EA is being forced to make changes. After laying off staff from the Apex team and canceling a planned Titanfall project, they've now shut down an in-development Black Panther game, laid off its staff, and closed the studio behind it entirely. There are a lot of reasons for why this might have happened. Some of it is likely tied to mounting internal pressure, a string of underperforming titles, and they're just being a little bit more cautious moving forward. Maybe the game wasn't coming together in the background. Maybe the writing leaned in the same direction or the same themes that players have been rejecting from games like Dragon Age the Veilguard. We've seen this kind of thing happen before. WB's Wonder Woman game ran into similar issues. But more broadly, I think that superhero games just aren't really landing anymore. Outside of Spider-Man, they've either been outright bad like Marvel's Avengers.
Mě jako reálně nikdy nebavily ty superheroes jako hry. Spider-Man, jak zmínil, Spider-Man je skvělej, to jo, jako. Ale když jsem viděl třeba ty Avengers a tak mě to ani jako neláká, ty vole, to hrát. To vypadá jak prostě píčovina, totální píčovina. Pak máš samozřejmě jako Marvel Rivals, ale to není jako, to bych neřekl, že to je hero jako hra, no. Hraješ za hrdiny, ale to je prostě oskinovaný Overwatch, který je actually dobrý.
Or quietly solid but commercially invisible like Guardians of the Galaxy, but I think a lot of this is just more tied to people just not really being all that interested in Marvel content anymore. I mean, Disney and Marvel have been making the exact same mistakes that the games industry is making right now, abandoning their core audience for this imagined broader audience of fans that they think that is out there. People call it superhero fatigue, but that's just deflection. If the content was actually good, if it resonated, people would be showing up, but they're not. The newer Marvel shows and movies just aren't connecting and the brand is failing. The strategy is basically the exact same.
Podle mě, kdyby udělali jako RPG hero, že by si prostě vybral, jakoby, co chceš hrát, nebo jaký chceš mít super schopnosti a nebyl by to jakoby známý superhrdina, ale prostě by to bylo fakt jako vymyšlený od začátku po konec, tak by se to chytlo. Ale takhle, že jako hrát vole za Ironmana a ty pičoviny, nikoho to neláká. Zase si podívám vole na Ironmana. Asi dvakrát rychlejší. Přemýšlím, no, asi nepotřebuji úplně upgrade, když to tak přemýšlím toho kompu. Počkám ještě chvilku a možná pak bych koupil novou grafiku.
Prioritize everybody except the people that made you popular in the first place and then pay the price when nobody shows up for it. Marvel movies used to be global events. Now the conversation is about how badly they're going to butcher the next character, show, or movie. Things have gotten so dire for these guys that they're pulling the Robert Downey Jr. ripcord, floating the idea of him coming in as Dr. Doom just to be able to jolt the brand back to life. Now, alongside the cancellation of the Black Panther game and the closure of its studio, EA announced that they're also going to be focusing on fewer franchises moving forward. And for a publisher like EA, that likely means that there are more layoffs coming on down the line. But honestly, I think this might be the right call for these guys to make. I don't think that people understand just how overextended these major publishers are. Right now, EA has at least 14 non-sports games in active development. That is not counting their annualized releases like Madden or FIFA. We are talking about massive, high-risk projects like Iron Man, Mass Effect 5, the Jedi Survivor sequel, Skate, Need for Speed, a new Battlefield, and more. Each one of these is a blockbuster bet. Each one of them is expensive, time-consuming, and fighting for internal resources. It's not that EA shouldn't have multiple projects in the works. It's that no publisher should be supporting this many flagship titles at once, especially when most of those franchises have either lost momentum or people just aren't even interested in them at all. The more these guys pile on, the less each one of them gets the attention it needs or the talent it needs to be able to see these games fully realized. Now, I've criticized other publishers, Ubisoft in particular, for leaning too hard on a few core franchises, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Rainbow Six. I've said that they should diversify, experiment, give their developers some room to make something new. But there's a line between creative variety and overcommitment. There's a difference between building a slate and throwing everything at the wall. That's the trap that EA has walked into. They have greenlit way too many projects, chasing way too many markets, convinced that they can engineer success through volume, and now they're pulling back. Not because they've learned anything, but because, well, the economics of it all caught up to them. Beyond that, I've talked about this in length in some of my videos talking about video game pricing, but there is a bigger structural issue that is looming for publishers like EA, and it has nothing to do with talent or budget. It's just saturation. These companies are spreading themselves way too thin, pumping out massive title year after year, all the while trying to convince us that it is a must-have. No, every single one of them is a must-have, but the truth is they are flooding a market that is already underwater. Some of these games are going to launch within months of one another, and sure, some of these guys are going to try to say that they're aimed at a different audience, but let's be real, there's going to be some overlap. Players who would have normally bought all of these games, they won't buy any of them because either they can't afford it or they're locked into something else. We are drowning in games right now, and to make matters worse for them, month after month, we keep seeing these unexpected games that break through. When players are faced with this much choice, the decision changes. It's no longer about whether the game is popular anymore, whether they
Jak jako, že se topíme v hrách, vole, já nemám co hrát do píči. Jak se jako topíme v hrách? Není co hrát.
Remember that game. It's about whether or not they feel like it's worth their time. And these big budget games, they have lost their edge. These studios have destroyed their reputations, burned through player trust, and now they're betting on brand names that don't even carry any weight. They keep chasing audiences that they don't have, trying to build the most broadly appealing version of every single IP, and the result are these generic, soulless games designed for everyone that end up connecting with no one. When your audience has a library full of options, many cheaper, better, and made by teams that actually care, do you think that they're going to drop $70 or $80 on an Iron Man game? Or do you think they're going to go look at Schedule 1 or Expedition 33 or the wave of Eastern games that are coming soon, like Phantom Blade Zero, Tides of Annihilation, or Wu-Chang Fallen Feathers? And
Co říkal Schedule 1, that's all. Tohle někdo hraje. Extrémně kladné. To má 186 000 recenzí. A vyšlo to před dvouma měsícema. Ty kokot. A ty jako jsi drogový dealer, vole, nebo co to je? Dope, pusher to Kingpink, manufacturer, distributor, range of drugs, jasně, no. OK. Vývojář Stevie JS. Je to jeho první hra, jo? OK. Addictive gameplay. Th- 34letá máma. Addicted to this game and building my empire. Hrál to i Asmon, jo? Jako recenze jsou na to hodně dobrý. Já nevím, no, jestli by mě to bavilo, ty vole. Taková, víš, jako píčovinka. Že slyším zvuk. The fuck. Je to ještě předběžný přístup, to ještě není jako plně to, jo. Vydaný. Okay.
Take a chance on something that actually feels fresh. This industry used to ask itself, what will people play? Now it needs to start asking, what is worth playing? Because right now, players have a lot of answers, and most of their games aren't a part of it. I am hoping, and yes, there's very heavy emphasis on hope here, that EA is finally learning from some of their mistakes. They hold some of the most iconic IP in the industry, and they have some of the best talent in the industry, but they have spent the last decade chasing vapor instead of players. If this move to consolidate resources and scale back production is a sign that they are ready to refocus on the actual audiences rather than theoretical ones, then maybe we might see something worth salvaging. 2 games stand out as potential turning points for this company: Mass Effect 5 and the next Battlefield. From the outside looking in, both projects seem like they're getting the time, resources, and leadership that they actually need. And more importantly, they appear to be aimed at the players who kept those franchises alive. Before Veilguard even released, the director of Mass Effect 5 came out to clarify that their team was not going to follow the same tone or aesthetics. That was clearly a preemptive move meant to create some distance between the 2 titles before Backlash hit in full force. Kind of makes me feel like they knew what was coming before it even happened. Whether or not that actually translates into something substantial, we're going to have to wait and see, but at least it shows some level of awareness for what their audience does and doesn't want. Battlefield, on the other hand, is going much further. After the disaster that was 2042, which now only hovers at around 6,000 players on Steam and is effectively just a dead game now, EA has completely overhauled its development approach. Instead of fragmenting the work across a bunch of disconnected teams, they are unifying their efforts. DICE is going to be the one handling the core systems, the class design, destructibility, moment-to-moment gunplay, while some of the other studios are going to be tackling the campaign, map creation, and more finer details. It's a more focused, structured setup that actually plays to each one of these studios' strengths rather than spreading everybody thin. But what I think is the most promising change is what they call Battlefield Labs. Rather than relying on entirely outsourcing all of their QA or waiting for last-minute betas, they're actually bringing in real players right now. Content creators, longtime fans, community voices to test and give feedback throughout development. Not just at the tail end, during the entire process of developing this game. This is something that I think should have been a standard years ago because with live service...
To je hodně dobrý, jako no. To je hodně dobrý přístup, musím říct. A vlastně oni už myslím vydali, ne? Nějaký trailer nebo něco. Jestli jsem to viděl správně. Jestli to pamatuju správně. A vypadalo to jako dobře, no. Že tam je zase už jako ta distraction tam je. A to se zvědavý, no. Jenomže to se bude podle mě trvat ještě tak rok nebo 2.
Games waiting into the end to figure out what players want is just a recipe for disaster. Too often we see devs guessing, throwing out systems and content that they think might work only to be met with backlash and disappointment. Battlefield Labs is the first real sign that EA might be done guessing. And if that ends up being true, they might actually have a shot at turning things around. I know that I shouldn't be optimistic. It's the worst thing for me to be, but I've been hearing some rumblings about the new Battlefield game, and I've heard Bad Company tossed around. I've heard BF3 and BF4, and if that ends up being the case, we might actually have a heater on our hands, and I really hope that ends up being the case because we need people to shift away from Call of Duty, and we need to shift towards more higher quality and just...
Jak jako potřebujeme, aby se shiftoval z Call of Duty? Nepotřebujeme. I když jako jo, potřebujeme, no, aby se Activision probral a taky jakoby trochu tu hru posunul někam dál, no. Nebo trochu. Spíš víc, aby ji posunul dál. Protože to je pořád stejná hra, pořád dokola.
Better military first-person shooters. This is coming from somebody that is a massive fan of those kind of games.
To je to stejný jako FIFA, no. FIFA by potřebovala brutálně nějakého kompetitora. Tam bylo PSko, že player eSports, já teď nevím, jak to bylo, ty vole. Něco soccer. PSko prostě. Ale to už je jaký, myslím, dead, ty vole, nebo jestli pořád PSko vychází, jsem jistý.
And I'm really hoping that this game turns out to be good. But with a lot of the things that I've heard and the way that they've been handling it, I feel like I can be a little optimistic with it at the very least. But when I sit here and I unload on these AAA publishers and these studios, I think that one thing gets lost is that I want them to fail. I genuinely want them to fail because it's the only language that these companies understand. You have to hit their books. If you don't hit their paychecks, they're not going to hear what you have to say. And in a lot...
Jako jo, s tím souhlasím, ale zase zároveň je to na píču, protože si to vezmeš. Tak to neodnese ten člověk, který to vymýšlí, tady ty kokotiny. Protože to prostě, že to prochází tím executive directorem a tak, že jo. A ten nepřijde o práci, přijde o práci ten developer. Což je prostě na píču.
A lot of cases, I think it's the only way for us to see some of these games turn around, for us to get better games in the future, and for some of these franchises maybe to resemble what they used to go back to proper form. Notice how I use that phrase without trying to sell copies of Dragon Age the Veilguard. That's the proper use. You know, I don't think that I'm alone in saying this, but in a lot of cases with many of these games, I would much rather see them flop and disappear rather than have to watch EA basically just drag Dragon Age back out into the daylight like it's Weekend at Bernie's and pretend like it's still a game worth playing anymore. You know, when I played Mass Effect Andromeda, I was just like, why? Just leave it at 3. I don't understand. I don't think that every franchise needs to go on forever. I think that some of these things have a
Assassin's
date,
Creed.
and it's just done after that. And sometimes there's things that these companies will leave off in the distance and they'll never bring back, and they definitely should. Legend of Dragoon, specifically, only. And Bloodborne too, I guess, but mostly Legend of Dragoon for me. But I think a lot of these companies have to kind of make a choice at one point in time. Either you have to be okay with that audience either staying static or growing slowly over time like it is with turn-based games, or at least it has, and then it kind of just exploded out of nowhere. Or you have to be okay with letting them go. And I think in a lot of cases, there's a lot of franchises that are out there that just need to be let go. And when I look at the long list of titles that EA has lined up, they are all very, very familiar names. And when you build a bad reputation for yourself, when you treat your players the way that EA has treated their players, those names are warning signs. They're nothing to be excited about. And players aren't going to show up for it. You have to keep that in mind. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, follow me on Twitch, follow me on Twitter, tell my cat to get off the computer behind me. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. Family.
No, je to v pičí. Co tam je teďkon? Ale jako Apex má pořád hodně lidí, ty vole, kdo to hraje. Jako jasný, že jo, těch 500k to nemá. Ty vole, ten upad tady. To fuck. Ale lidi 200k to pořád má, no, jako. To jim stačí, podle mě. To je jenom Steam, že jo, Apex je ještě na konzolích a tak. Season 16. Okay. Jak si dám, vole, ten co je ve wishlistu? Tady nejde to. Once Human je MMORPG. Já jsem to actually nehrál, ty vole. Já jsem si to chtěl zahrát a potom jak to vyšlo, tak jsem to nehrál. Ale přemýšlím o tom, že bych si to zahrál. O, to docela nahoru. Throne and Liberty, 10. jo. Lost Ark má pořád tolik lidí, co to hraje. Každý den tam jsou fresh servery. Fakt jo. Počkej, ale kdy má být to další patch na poéčko? To už budou 3 měsíce, ne? Teďko někdy to budou 3 měsíce? Nebo ne? Nebo ne? Nebo to je teprve měsíc? Píči. Jo, v březnu to vyšlo. No, na konci března, no, takže duben. Kurva, já chci tu Roguru. Já bych si to úplně zahrál, já bych si to fakt zahrál. Ale prostě ty klasy, co tam jsou, mě vůbec nelákají, ty vole. Ale ani jedna mě vůbec neláká. Black Desert Online. Pak bude Advent, OK. Já ty jsi hrál vlastně ten Grey Zone, je to dobrý nebo ne? To je nový update. 5000. Jeba, je to jeba, jo. OK. Queenfall, ty vole. To ještě někdo hraje, jo. Holy shit. Tam děláš hodně questy, což je stejně zvyklý. No a je to teda typický jako typická arena Escape from Tarkov, nebo je to jinačí? Jako oni tady píšou Open World MMO FPS, no. Jak se na tom vlastně s diskem? 700 giga mám volný. Žádná zaznamenává aktivita. Jedna velká mapa, co jsi tam helikoptérou nebo pěšky. OK. A je to jako velká mapa, nebo ne? Nebo víceméně furt chodíš na stejný místa? Se divím, že ten Baldur's Gate má pořád tolik lidí, co to hraje. Děláš questy v endgame, jinak tam je asi 8 lokací, kde máš PvP a děláš tam questy. OK. Počkej, já chci asi vidět tohle. Mě to jsem zrovna zapl.
Gray Zone Warfare, one of the largest attempts to dethrone the kings of the genre, just had its biggest update yet. This is an open world PvEVP with 3 teams of 16 posed against one another in a fight for control of territory within Southeast Asia. You dive into the jungle solo or with your team in a massive map that has no loading screens. There is no raid timer, there is no extract. There's your missions, the map, your buddies, or maybe just you alone. When Gray Zone's alpha tests launched, it was placed precisely during a timely hiccup by the Tarkov devs, who had just launched a $250,000 edition that included features that were promised to the gamers who had already supported the most by buying the existing highest version. This left many Tarkov players seeking refuge in a game that could replace Tarkov, and soon after, Gray Zone and Arena Breakout would try their best to take that stage. Gray Zone's premise was immense and exciting. A giant map with no raid timer, 3 teams, no loading screens. On paper, that sounds amazing. Battlestate had been talking for years about how their eventual goal was to have Tarkov be an open world where all maps would truly be connected, and here Gray Zone was actually doing it. But in reality, these cool features had issues not only by themselves, but when combined together, caused even more. Issues that I feel I was alone in calling out mere hours into the test and in my videos after the launch. Things like, why am I on a team if my task system is a linear personal quest line where all of the tasks are most efficiently completed when playing alone? How am I supposed to fight players when they can now respawn and be back at my position within mere minutes? How am I supposed to move across the map when the enemy team can see the exact coordinate of the 3 reasonable options I have to land my helicopter at, meaning they can just split 3 people to each one and control an entire section of my map? These 3 things, contradicting progression gameplay, a non-conclusive PvP loop, and a lack of
Jak to vypadá ten batoh?
map. These 3 things,
Máš i radiaci, jo.
contradicting progression gameplay, a non-conclusive PvP loop, and a lack of reasonable safe transport throughout the entire map. Combine these 3 things with issues like
Lack of good transport throughout the map. Jako mohli by tam mít aspoň auta. Jo, nebo něco. Když teda se tam můžeš dostat i pěšky. Když se můžeš dostat pěšky, tak by to měl být auta, ne? Byl aspoň. Nebo jsou tam auta. Contradicting progression gameplay, non-conclusive PvP loop.
Poor performance on mid-tier systems, clunky enemy AI, arcadey movement, and a bit of technical issues, and I'm pretty sure this is why the game lost 94% of its players in 2 months. But now it's back. Do note for transparency, they sent me to their office in Brno, the Czech Republic. I got to shoot guns in Europe, which was really cool. I got to go look at cool churches and play their game for 2 hours in their office for a live stream. I didn't get paid anything. I'm not required to make this video or say game good, but they've kindly covered that entire very nice trip, including a few Czech beers. Now, with that said, they've given me an early look at their Winds of War update, including a massive overhaul to their PvP with capturable outpost.
Ty vole, ta mapa vypadá obrovsky, jebe.
Including a massive overhaul to their PvP.
Píče, jsem to nestihl. Ale to... Tady ve prostřed, to je to město.
Now, with that said, they've given me an early look at their Winds of War update, including a massive overhaul.
Tam zatím nic není? OK. Jo, tady to je to město, ten Basecamp. A tady to. Jako obojí ne, budou města asi. Je tady to. Nebo ne? Nebo ty to máš ještě nějaký frakce nebo něco? Tiger Bay nad Blue Lagoon. Máš tam 3 frakce. OK, takže ty máš ještě frakce. Zajímavý. No počkej, a lidi ze stejné frakce se můžou zabít nebo ne, když jsi v PvP zóně? A má mega penalizaci a když umře, tak si nemůže vybrat mrtvolo, tak? OK. A poznáš ho vůbec, že je z tvojí frakce? Nebo musíš, vole, hledat nějaký, vole, nápis na jeho malinkatý uniformě, vole?
To their PvP with capturable outposts, dynamic weather, a brand new squad task system, major task improvements, new weapons and gear, and a really impressive set of quality of life improvements across the whole board. If you missed the last smaller update too, not only did dynamic weather get added since launch, but also a day-night cycle with flashlights, lasers, night vision goggles, and beautiful UE5 sunrises. Firstly, I will start with something good. I will admit, just like how the world was the most impressive part before, it still is. The weather is probably the
Píče, takže musíš hledat, vole, Airbandy. No to je to slepý jak píča, vole.
best I've ever seen in a game. When it's heavily raining in Gray Zone, I've never seen better rain in a video game. Puddles on the ground form over time, areas get flooded entirely. The water will find like cracks in the rocks and dirt and look like it's flowing down them.
It's gonna be nice. Whoa, look at the puddling on the floor, dude.
Yeah, I was just looking at that.
Look at
the water on the ground, like it finds creases in rocks and then makes water flow down the creases on the rocks. That all flows really well into my next note that this is probably the most demanding PvP game I've ever played. It brings my 4090 down to 40 FPS sometimes when I'm aiming down scope.
No já jsem jako koukal, vole, jakože se mu to seká a má 4090. Jakože, what? To asi nebude úplně, vole, vybalancovaná hra.
Chunking dips in frame rate when riding even just the heli around. Although the frames are framey, it is slightly better than when I last played, I think, because it's been a while. And this game has absolutely a unique vibe when trekking silently through the jungle. There's just nothing like it. It is a high-end game to run, but it does feel great. But now, there's a whole new system that changes the gameplay loop of PvE and PvP drastically, good and bad. There's a bunch of new points throughout the map which can be captured at random by any of the 3 teams. Once you gain control of one, inside, you go inside like the center of the cop, and you press tab and boom, you're in your stash. Neat, you don't have to go back to base. You can buy from traders here, you can turn in or receive task items here, and as a side note, you can actually accept and complete quite a bit of your tasks outside in the world now, as long as they don't require picking up an item or something, meaning you don't have to immediately go back to base after each and every quest. Especially in the starter town, that speeds up that monotonous progression a lot, and that's one of the things I feel that they really took advantage of this persistent open world formula with, and for PvE flow, I like that a lot. But the worst part about these cops is that if your team gets attacked at one,
Gator is secured and fully under our control.
you get notified by this commander guy who's louder than gunshots screaming in your ear. Seriously, look at the wavelength. That's him. That's gunshots and that's him. This is as you're listening for a player running by you or you're fighting at a different objective across the map. I don't know how that got past the QA team. Not only does it notify you of any capturing of cops, but it also notifies you of when your team is just shot at or shooting at an enemy anywhere on the map. Every single time. He was so loud that even the developers themselves are putting memes up about it.
These are all AK-12s.
And excuse me, I have a radio operator to silence.
Luckily, you won't experience this, at least in the same way. After we gave them immediate feedback, they added a ton of parameters to make sure that you're only getting notified when you're close to those alerts. I haven't experienced this yet because these changes are only coming when the build goes live for all players. When one team makes contact with another, there's this alert feature which also puts a zone marker on the map. It's roughly a 200-meter radius, and it lets you know where this radio call is coming from. It reveals the general location of that enemy player, even from a silent long-range sniper shot that nobody could hear. It kind of kills the mystery of ranged combat and removes the thrill of not knowing where a deadly shot came from. Like when you take a shot that lands, the game rewards you with a big marker over your head for the enemy team to hunt you down with. Multiple times I had people that were attacking us or me attacking another group that easily got doxed by those markers.
Jako tohle je ta marka, jestli to chápu správně, co se objeví, když někdo vystřelí. Co? Slyšel jsem ho správně? Že když vystřelíš, tak se tady někde objeví marka? Jo, tady jo. To je černý kruh. Že tady se prostě střílí. A tady, když někdo vystřílí, tak se tady objeví červený kruh. Tady se objeví červený kruh, tady se objeví červený kruh, tady se objeví červený kruh. To je na píču. To je pěkně na hovno. What the fuck? Kdo s tím přišel? To je dobrá sračka, ale jakože to je hodně dobrá sračka. Pochopil bych, jako kdyby on byl třeba tady. Kdyby byl třeba tady, tak jako asi jako jo. Ale ne, vole, že ty jsi třeba tady a tady někdo bude střílet a ty to uvidíš tady, vole. Ty píčovina jak svině. A to se ukazuje, i když jako někdo střílí na NPCčka, nebo když střílí někdo na hráče, tak se to ukáže.
And in my opinion, ambiguity is just everything for like solo stealthy play. So I just wasn't the biggest fan of this. Instead of giving these instant precise pings, maybe let the players mark suspected positions like in squad, which would be rewarding the aware and communicative teams over giving them automated alerts.
I think I'm gonna watch these fields and the LZ points.
We're taking heavy fire.
They just shot at you?
I didn't hear anything.
It says PvP zone to your southeast. What? PvP zone to your southeast? Who's over there?
Wait, does it paint an area when you get shot at on the map?
Yeah, instantly.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely heard nothing.
Now, on the other hand, these cops are great for PvE. If you die, you can respawn to the closest captured cop and walk back into the AO from close by. This works for PvE, but in PvP, it's a different story. When I first reviewed the game, I said a big downside to the PvP loop was that when you successfully killed another...
Hodně PvP v jednom endgame ještě, kde je hodně... Jako jasně, všechno to má jako plusy a minusy, že jo. Plusy to má takový, že potom máš jako větší PvP. A hlavně plus je i takovej, že nepotkáš nějakýho, nebo že prostě člověk, který fakt jako sedí ve křoví, tak lidi ho najdou, že jo, díky tomuhle.
Other player in battle, they weren't really dead. They simply could respawn back at base, re-kit, and fly to a nearby LZ within a couple minutes. On average, when I took someone out, I could give myself roughly 5 minutes before they could possibly be back if they tried their best. This let me have at least a little bit of time to secure the area, grab their loot, and move away from the hotspot. If they landed close, I'd likely also hear their helicopter, making it even easier to avoid them. I don't like this meta because it's a bit weird, and it's worse now. With the new system, you don't have to fly back from main. You can respawn at the closest cop and rush back to your body in sometimes under 2.5 minutes. This stinks, especially when it's like a cop v cop fight between teams.
To je na piču. 2,5 minuty. Já jsem hned tady. Ještě vyladí, protože to je trochu broken. Já tak jako... Ono trošku vypadá, že oni budou to poslouchat komunitu, takže to vypadá dobře, to vypadá jako to nadějně.
The moment you kill someone, you can't take any time to secure the area around them safely and check if they had teammates. You're going to have to YOLO to the body, yoink everything, get out within seconds after killing them to probably be safe. This creates a meat grinder of terrible combat with no flow, frontline, or conclusion. You'll die a lot in these flip-flop firefights where someone kills a player, then that player respawns and runs back with an M4 and 2 mags and nothing to lose, sprinting and jumping around until they reach their main body.
I'm trying to get him to move.
Oh my gosh, your jump shooting is so funny, dude. The average lifespan in these fights when playing aggressively and trying your best to win is maybe like 4 minutes. When players can so easily respawn and be back in a couple minutes to scavenge bodies, as gear is being traded so chaotically in the fight, players stopped caring for their lives, and the fights, in my opinion, fell very flat. The areas of forest or jungle around the cops were just littered with bodies from like waves of respawns from each team. Now, big changes coming through in the version that is what you're going to be able to play. The devs said to us that they're disabling respawns on the public build if a cop is contested, but that's only when players are on the point contesting it or suppressing the AI there. But also, to help with PvP, this update added armbands that are only visible to your team, and in the version you'll play, these have IR glowy bits to help with IFFing your buddies in the spooky dark jungle at night. Again, only visible to your buddies, not the enemy. I like it. A lot of streamers have also suggested that nearby teammates could also appear as blue dots on your compass up at the top of the screen, which I also vote for. Back to cops though. I'm sorry, this is a big part of the video because it's the biggest part of the update. The AI alone were so bad at defending the cops that players with just a little bit of experience dealing with them would wipe a cop in under 20 seconds and capture it without a sweat. Then once they left, another player group would just come and take it back, flip-flop, snip, snap, snip, snap.
Snip, snap,
Combine that with the movement that we mentioned days after launch of this game that rewards players for sprinting around, doing jump shots in the dark to distract the enemy team, and literally mag dumping players while midair.
Teorečko.
I just wasn't a fan of the cop warfare experience here. It felt less intense, extremely less strategic, repetitive, and just gamey compared to the usual fight in DayZ or Tarkov. In the end, defending a cop just does nothing but waste your time. You will die from the enemies freely respawning and running back aimlessly, and on the version that you're going to play, the moment your AI are suppressed at your cop, you won't be able to respawn there for a good bit of time. You'll have to walk or fly back. And that also leads me into my second issue of the game since launch. If you're selecting an LZ, it should be a field, and then you select what part of the field you want to land in.
Yeah.
Yes, it would mean more tracks that they would have to create, but like this 1x1 meter spot where you land and the enemies know where you're going, if they see you flying overhead towards a certain direction, that is just instantly I'm out of the immersion. It's a game. It's a gaming mechanic. This is a enemy bird coming into Delta 2.
Yep.
LZ camping, which is still prevalent and gamey as ever. It is maybe 20% less common with the addition of the ability to respawn and rearm at cops, but especially when defending one, players will be flying in to attack constantly, hoping that you aren't ready. Most of the time we were, especially when the LZs got as close as 200 meters from our cop. We'd be just chilling there in our stash and then just hear rotors chopping overhead, and then we'd know to immediately run south to intercept them, and you can guess how that ended for them every single time. Heli inbound, Mike 3.
Dávalo se jí tohleto.
All of my gear seems to be back.
Oh, he's going back to it. Heli. Checking hostile heli. On you, Fu, on you.
Okay,
Oh,
landing
yeah.
now.
Yep. I'm using you as bait.
I see them.
I see him. He's dead.
One dead.
One dead. The fact that my player still knows the exact location of where the enemy bird is going to land down to the square meter, and that player on the bird can't do anything to evade a hot LZ once boarding his heli 5 minutes earlier, is just by far the dumbest mechanic in the game. It seriously takes me out of any immersion almost entirely by itself and leaves no room for strategy on your method of inserting into a mission, and it's the first thing you do every time you play the game. Now, with every problem in this video, I want to offer a solution or an idea for a solution, maybe in case someone didn't think about it or something. The designers are going to hate me by the end of this video, and you can hit me in real life when I get back to check next time or something. I don't know. I met everybody that I'm talking to in this video, and they were very nice, to be fair. Devs, maybe you could create multiple groups of LZs. Let's say if there's like 25 LZs currently in the game, you could maybe make like 75 more. Man, they're gonna hang me. But then you, at random, give each of the 3 teams a random assortment of LZs that also shift every hour, right? This would make each team have different LZs, force players to not know if the LZs they've memorized because they're experienced are even active or not, and make it very difficult to predict a fight because every hour the LZs would trade between teams. Overall, whatever system you guys are eventually going to settle on, I should simply not know exactly where an enemy heli is going to land if I see it flying in a certain direction. The heli currently also just lands you in the middle of giant open fields. Ask any crew chief in Vietnam, you don't do this. You pick a side of the field that you deem is safest in the context of the mission so that your troops can get to cover quickly. Most of the times, if this was without like Kaz or something, operators would even drop a bomb in the middle of the jungle to kill trees and make a tiny clearing, and then they would do a tiny little LZ where they would fly like a Huey right above it and then fast rope the dudes down because it was such a small LZ, and that's how they did it. They didn't land in the middle of rice paddies. That is certain death. Good books, in case you want to read them, about Vietnam warfare is Low Level Hell. What other ones do I have? SOG Codename Dynamite and Across the Fence by John Stryker Meyer. All really cool books that basically describe hundreds of moments like these that you would never do. In my video, not even a week after release, I mentioned an idea where you'd have a procedural system to tell your pilot to land at specific spots within given zones that were considered LZs. Or maybe you'd be able to tell your pilot to cancel the landing upon taking fire. Now this would create like a whole need for a procedural system where the pilot could like break off of the rail at any point, and that's more complex. But I think the strategy or method that I mentioned above, where you just create a lot of LZs and then trade them in between teams, is not too complex compared to that. And we're still sitting here with LZ camping being a big problem, so maybe that solution could work better. I mean, the system is so messy, right, that the game currently has a hidden 5-second invulnerability timer right after feet touch the ground, with zero indicator to the player who's defending their cop or their friends by ambushing that landing player. Great mechanic. Loved discovering it on the official stream. Go.
Kdybys to mohl ovládat ty, tak potom to vytvoří stejně problém takový, že než ty vystoupíš z toho letadla, z té heliny, tak tě sudá, vole. Ale zase můžeš přistát kdekoliv, no. Což je potom taky může potom zase dělat jiný problémy.
Did you see him go side to side? Yeah, he's doing the friendly wiggle and died.
Okay, that's enough about LZs. Remember earlier, I had mentioned that the game also featured the Night Ops update in November of last year. This added NVGs, IR lasers, and they're pretty cool. They look totally unique and are, in my opinion, one of the best attempts at recreating that feeling of running night vision. But unfortunately, the game's nighttime is currently so bright that the nods are currently useless. I mean, unless you're running a really bad monitor and you've got the Texas sun hitting your face through a window, you're better off just squinting at the screen or gamma abusing with the game's in-game gamma abuse slider. Outside the game, I did this with my OBS in a couple of seconds worth of filters, and ooh, it's bad, dude. All the detail is left in those darker areas, and you can just raise it right up. Daisy fixed this by having grain. So things that are lit up don't get grainy, but like the dark areas do, and if you raise that, it just turns into that. Rust also does it in a certain way. They just turn everything like dark blue, and so if you gamma abuse Rust, it's really hard to do it effectively. In Arma 3, for example, in our ops, we actually just make it so dark, usually whenever there's like PvP, that you just can't gamma abuse because everything is literally the color black. Everything but the horizon will be the color black. It's awesome. The tubes in Gray Zone have this weird 1.5x zoom to them that isn't real to life at all. There's also weird detached movement in the tube when either moving around or aiming down your sight. And I'm not talking about the housing movement here, by the way. That's fine. I'm talking about the image in here should stay the same as the area behind it, no matter what this tube is doing. It should just be this, but brighter and green. The biggest problem as well is that they're just too grainy for full moon nights we have in the game currently. I have probably 1,000+ hours under night vision for anything from hog hunting.
I'm a little concerned I may have woken someone up.
To airsoft, to driving dirt bikes in West Texas. These are like looking through my 1980s era PVS 5s, where running around with one of those on probably carries a non-zero chance of you tripping and falling into the back rooms at 3 in the morning. In game, these are high-end PVS 31s with likely really expensive high-tech tubes inside. If you've ever looked through unfilmed white Foss tubes before, it's insane. I run some nice tubes and think that mine are great, but what modern operators use in these things would be comparable to turning on the sun during a full moon like it's daytime now. The only place where modern night vision still gets this grainy like we see in Gray Zone is in very low illum areas. Like if there's thick clouds with no light pollution that totally filters out all the starlight. Combine that with a jungle canopy, and yeah, you'll get moments where even good night vision can't see. That's when things like illuminators come in handy. Those laser light combo PEC boxes on the front of our rifles in Gray Zone both laze and illuminate targets for operators in low light, as any amount of lasers or light emission can be seen by other bad guys. In real life, I can push a pressure pad on the IR device to momentarily activate it, and as soon as I release it, it turns off. This is useful for quickly acquiring a bad guy with your laser, taking him out, but deactivating your light as soon as you're done so someone else can't have the time to trace the laser back to you. In Gray Zone, you can't do this. You can select between IR or white light, which is cool, that's rare in games, or IR invisible laser, which is poggers in the chat, as my gamer friend Joshua Guz would say, but there's a delay on your PEC box or any tac light you use where you can't hold to activate, but only press to toggle it. And the toggle has this really annoying like 1 second cooldown for no reason that makes it a chore to quickly activate and then deactivate. So before I went on a night op in the game, I was going to run a variable optic on my rifle and passively look through it to keep my signature reduction at a maximum against other players. I knew it'd probably be a little tough to use the LPVO through nods, but a quick test showed me the LPVO just fully blurs my view when looking through it, even at 1x.
Which is something you may think is correct until you have night vision goggles and AR-15 and a target at 100 meters.
This doesn't happen. Yes, it's not the best way to aim at night. It's not great, but passive aiming, even through sights that aren't in EOTech, is very possible. Especially at 1x zoom, LPVOs are okay. This actually gets better the bigger of a scope that you go with, because just more light is coming through the scope the larger it is. So even with 3x on a bigger caliber.
308. Now I'm gonna put this up to 18 and see if I can make the same shot. Yep.
In reality, shots in the forest at real people are a bit trickier than a shot on a big steel plate at 30 minutes after the sunset while the sky is still like bright with twilight. The longer zoom you set your scope to, the less light you'll see through it. So it will be darker. It will be a dark image. You might just not see the target behind the crosshair. You might have a rainy night fogging up your optic and nods, just a bit too much to see anything. But this, for a night vision dedicated update, this actually isn't that realistic. I get that this is all UE5 picture-in-picture scope science, and it's tough to remake this stuff in a game. But if you want the night vision in the game to be useful, then make it like real life, where night is dark and night vision makes it less so. I eventually found myself, even me, yes, the night vision nerd of all nerds, not using NVGs, as I just felt like they downgraded my awareness in almost all circumstances. This is apparently a full moon that's just non-stop full moon. The moon cycle, the moon phase is not really in the game yet. But also, if this is a full moon, these night vision goggles need to almost be as clear as real daytime. They need to almost have no grain at all, except for maybe the darkest of areas under jungle canopy.
I was just messing around with the moats. You can do it. Look at this.
Co je Ark?
Enough about night vision. A little bit.
To se osobně divím, že hrál Ark. Když je takový jako
To balance it
hardcore.
out, the task system has gained a massive upgrade, and that is these little squad tasks. You can squad off with 3 buddies and then accept a mission that'll take you to random objectives across the map. I took a few buddies to a sawmill where we needed to locate like 3 or 4 beacons and activate them, and then leave the area at a certain position. Nothing was directly marked other than a point of interest where the beacons were hidden, so it was up to us on how we wanted to approach, take out the guards, move in, and find our stuff we needed to find. I think although these missions are maybe a little dry, they could easily add some higher difficulty options and give better rewards over time with future versions of the system. I kind of wish the whole game was just like these, like raids that I could sign up for with my buddies so that I could play with my team in my team-based shooter and not have to feel like I'm missing out on cool content by not touching this single-person linear quest line. This single feature is what I was asking for mainly since launch, a way to play and progress with my friends, no matter how far forwards or backwards they are behind my progression. Yeah, good part of the update, solid. That fixes a big part of the game. So where does all this put us with Grayzone a year later? Let's look back at the 3 things I felt were the reasons that Grayzone didn't take off at launch, and if Madfinger has solved any of them. Contradicting progression gameplay. Now you can progress with your buds, so that's marked off, but I would like to see this go further with a more interesting or challenging quests that don't feel randomly generated. Like I said before, it's a solid start. The non-conclusive PvP loop. I still think that this is the case, and cops almost make PvP worse. I know PvP is not the focus of Grayzone, it's a PvE main course with PvP as the dessert to give the PvE experience some spicy flavor. I'm going to say PvE a million times in this script, but also PvP seems to be the focus of this update, and I
PvP není fokus. To je zvláštní, ne?
don't think it works well. Find some way to make these cops less flip-floppy, make them have a long cooldown after capture. I stole that idea from Big Fry. Make more AI patrols around them, make the AI more difficult, make them more solid, make the fights for them require more than just one person. Give us rewards for capturing them and make a capture of one of them a big experience and not just something that you go up and hold F on a laptop and then the place spawns people that appear out of nowhere. Currently, that system feels like a bad, like, capture the island PvP scenario on Arma 3. It feels like something that was scripted to just be like a cheap feature in a game mode. It doesn't feel like this should be part of the official experience in Gray Zone Warfare quite yet. It still feels very simple. And the last one is a lack of reasonable safe transport throughout the entire map. This is moderately better.
No hele, a když si teda nastoupíš do té haliny a už letíš v té halině, může tě někdo pořád sundat, když už s ním letíš? Nebo máš protekci?
With PvE gameplay, as after capturing a cop, I can stash loot and come rearm instead of relying on LZs to fly to and from my main base. But the PvP gameplay surrounding cops still relies heavily on use of the heli, and this makes the issue still as prevalent as before. And smaller things too. How is the optimization? It's better. It's still not great. I constantly switch from a scope just to have better frames at times, because when you scope in, your frames drop like 40 FPS. And there's lots of just random lag spikes here and there. How is the audio? I think that they did a lot with the environment, especially day and night, have very distinct soundscapes. Weather sounds great. I don't know if I've seen a thunderstorm yet in game, but rain is nice and makes me feel all warm and fuzzy, just like I feel like when getting caught in a torrential downpour in real life. Is anyone else like this? I like rain. Like, I like getting muddy and wet and not seeing anything. Am I weird? Should I sign?
Okay, giving up. There's so much loot in that jungle, by the way. Okay, my last MP7. I am running out again. I'm grabbing headset this time.
I think footstep audio of both my own and enemy footsteps was really dry and repetitive though. I'd like to see more sound samples of footsteps to make footsteps sound more dynamic and hear things like sticks crack farther away and not know if I'm hearing a person or if that's just like leaves crunching in the distance because of wind. But also I'd like the ability to go pretty much silent when sneaking up close to someone, because right now the game kind of just rewards whoever sits still, because if you try to sneak around slowly, you're still going to be audible in the jungle. In the jungle, a lot of the jungle is wet and damp, and so there's not a lot of dry sticks and leaves to step on, and a lot of times when it's wet and damp outside, you can sneak like big time. Like even big plants, like big jungle plants can rub up against you, and because they're wet and damp, they like bend more than they scratch. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm just crazy. I like being outside when it's raining. Whenever it like rained when I was little and we would go airsofting, we all loved it because that means that we could sneak up on people, because otherwise you'd have those dry oak leaves that are like the waxy ones in Texas and just crunch. I'm going crazy. Gunshots sound really bad. I mean, anything outside of my own gun sounds bad. You'll commonly hear reports before the cracks of a rifle, which is the inverse of what it should be, or hear a gunshot that sounds like it's 50 meters out, but it's actually like 400, just because there's like no difference between the gunshot audio at range or close. I can hear gunshots out here to the north.
Eyes up, blue forces nearby.
Maybe you're just a better gamer. You heard a gunshot now?
There's absolute shots.
Yeah,
100% shots.
there's
100%
shots 3, 4, 5.
God, I didn't hear those at all until just now. Like
Yeah,
10 seconds
I
ago.
had to leave the base, then I can hear them.
I hear them like they're right in front of me. You can't hear suppressed rifles past like really low range, like 200 meters, and unsuppressed rifles you can't hear past like 600. It's really just weird. You don't hear distant firefights like at all. You hear like loud gunshots like they're right beside you, but then they're just a little quieter when they're like far away. Everything about gunshots is probably the worst part of the audio-visual experience here. And I think that was the same when the game first launched, too. I think we had a lot of complaints about gunshots. Mortars landing sound like firecrackers. Reverb outdoors doesn't really sound realistic at all. I didn't really have like an immersive firefight with good sound in the 15 hours or 20 hours that I played. But all in all, I think it's a good update. But Gray Zone still has a lot of work to do. And I'm surprised how much feedback we've had to give.
Tak to ale na piču, vole, že jako jasně není to Extraction, ale trošku Extraction shooter má na hovno zvuky. Jakože však je to FPSka. Tam jsou dvě nejdůležitější věci u FPS. Střílení a zvuk.
That wasn't caught by QA testers. I mean, in my 20 hours spent playing this version, I found a glitch that allowed me to see through the jungle and spot enemies hundreds of meters away through any foliage between me and them. And I can replicate this almost at any time with about 10 seconds of doohickying with my game. Don't worry, I sent this to devs immediately and shall abuse this by myself until it is patched. Combine that with the insanely intrusive commander guy in our version yapping about objectives miles away constantly, scopes that don't work right, night vision still being useless after being in the game for half a year now, gamma abuse being a literal in-game option. It's a long road for Gray Zone until it's done. But I had a moment the last day of recording. I jumped into the jungle solo. I took a flight to a nearby enemy cop and cleared it out. I captured it for my own team. I went to the resort known as Midnight Sapphire, and I ran into a multi-layered line of defensive sentries that I had to tactically remove as I inched closer and closer to the building. And this was no easy fight. A teammate nearby pushed the opposite side almost at the same time, and we met in the building. It was kind of scary looting the building and clearing it, as I also knew that teammates were inside, but it was cool to hear like his in-game VoIP and kind of figure out where he was based off of that.
I'm gonna go outside. Go ahead and shoot everybody here.
Okay. There was a lot of loud shooting and screaming inside that was a little chaotic. So I looted a lot of the bodies, I found keys and explored the place, and I used those keys I found to open up nearby houses that a YouTuber Nice Guy was showing me how to do. So he like brought me over to these houses and we checked them out. There was some cool loot in those. And then I split my way back to the main building to go loot it some more because I wanted to go make sure I got everything. And then I got a message. Nice Guy had told me that some enemy had landed to the east at an LZ, and it gave me this sudden realization that we weren't alone. This wasn't just like a Ghost Recon match, you know? There was a big threat that was potentially coming my way. So I snuck out of the area back to my cop. I was able to unload my loot safely and exited without a scratch, well, minus the vomiting because my stomach at one point got blasted onto the wall behind me. But I had a moment where I said, you know what? I get it. I get Gray Zone. I didn't even have player contact, but the whole situation got a lot more intense the moment that there was a mix of bad actors within my area of operations texted to me from a trusted source. Just that little message was cool. I didn't feel that last time. I didn't feel that at launch, but I felt it this time. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more autistic night vision trivia, and I'll see you in the next one. Did you know that the PVS-7 was made a single tube system because the American government deemed Generation 3 tubes too expensive to be put into dual tubes like the older Gen 2 PVS-5s? In the end, the United States put crappy night vision on our own soldiers because there's nothing better than budget cut.
Ale dobrý, ty vole. Američan. Já si vždycky kurva říkám, že bych se že bych si jako zahrál nějakou takovouhle hru. Jenomže já prostě vím, že v ní budu brutálně, ale brutálně špatnej. Jo. A to mě právě pokaždý jako odláká. Což je jako i píčovina, že jo? Protože do té doby, než to fakt jako začneš hrát a budeš to hrát další dobu, tak prostě budeš pořád špatnej. A kolik je to hraje lidí? 9,5K, jo. 14. Ale Battlefront je něco jiného. Battlefront je jenom tupá střílečka. To fakt jako, víš, jako to fakt jenom nabíháš a střílíš, nabíháš, střílíš, nabíháš, střílíš, nabíháš, střílíš jako retard. To je prostě jenom tupá střílečka, to nic jako není. Tam není žádné jako, že musíš trochu přemýšlet o té hře, nějak taktizovat a tak podobně. To je jenom zabíjíš, střílíš, vole. Vidíš týpka, střílíš. Jo, to je všechno. To je prostě něco jiného, že jo. Nebo aspoň já to tak mám, jakože já to tak cítím jako jinak, no. To je to stejný jako Warzone a tady ty jako podobné hry, Apex a tak. Proč Tactical Edition stojí méně než základní verze? A počkej, to je upgrade. Jo, ale není tam, já nevím, no, já v té hře necítím ten competitive, víš, jako element. A prostě není vůbec. To stejný jako třeba Warzone, prostě zapneš, naletíš, cípneš, naletíš, cípneš, naletíš, cípneš, víš, jako. Že je mi prakticky úplně jedno, jestli jsem první v tabulce, nebo jestli jsem poslední v tabulce. Je mi to úplně, ale úplně ukradený. Jsou hodinový videa, ty vole, o tom Arcade Rust jebe. The cinematic shooter that's changing the genre. Okay. Ale ta Naraka je pořád kámo nahoře, ty vole. Jako lidi to pořád hrajou, ale mě by se zajímalo, kolik lidí je z EU. Že to má cenu vůbec hrát. Protože jestli to bude většina vole z Ázie a tak podobně bylo, tak... Ani nezahraješ. Trochu přemýšlím, kámo, o tom Greyzoneu, že bych to koupil, kurva. Ale úplně nevím, jestli to budu fakt hrát. Nevím, co si zahrát. Myšlím o tom Once Human, no, ale... Jo, no, ale já budu stejně končit vlastně. To už je jedna. Budu uvařit. A možná to potom ještě na večer zapnu. Mějte se krásně a zatím. Čau, čau.